don't have one of those. You have two? So give me one.
No, I don't. Yeah, yeah. I have this already.
It's,
Carl, you have this? I don't think he does. Carl, you have this?
Brandt media come in yet? We're up. Let's call this meeting to order. If you wouldn't mind, please rise and join with me in the pledge allegiance to the United States. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yield the floor to Chair Ostrowski for the beginning of our budget meeting.
Okay, thank you. Is there any amendments to the agenda? I'd like to propose a change to the agenda on under discussions. Insert a discussion on the budget process for 2019-2020.
I'm sorry, what did you say? Am I on?
I would like to add to the agenda under discussions, E, call it 2.5, a discussion about the upcoming budget process for 2019 and 20.
You can talk about the process, but you can't talk about anything about what you're going to put in the budget or discuss anything that you're going to anticipate for that budget, because you can't have those discussions before that budget committee meeting is noticed
Right.
and done. But you can do some kind of process.
Yeah,
And
I
training
want to
process.
discuss some process issues, that's all.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other adoptions or amendments to the agenda? If not, I move it to be approved.
I so move.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. We'll move on to public comments. Are there any public comments? No public?
Can I make a public comment real quick?
Sure.
Hi, Sheriff Ford from Sheriff's Office. Just a quick update. I sent an email out to the commissioners and county employees about our radio communications. As you all know, we've been down almost about 2 months now from the service. We've had some pretty high-profile, dangerous situations we've been in with no communication, the deputies. Like I said in my email, we've had some sleepless nights, but we worked with Day Wireless on getting that system back up. Yesterday, they were able to replace a microwave on the Black Mound. And we actually have better service than we've ever had in a long time, but it's still a temporary system. And commissioners are working on trying to replace the aging, out-of-date microwave system. So I'm just pretty pleased that we have our system back up where we can now communicate with the deputies and first responders and road workers in the South County.
Great. Thank
Thanks,
you, Sheriff.
Sheriff.
Thank you. Okay, no other public comments. We'll move on to approval of minutes. The Budget Committee quarterly, October 31st, 2018 minutes. Are there any questions regarding the minutes for that period?
I move that we approve the October 31st, 2018 Budget Committee quarterly minutes.
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, move on to the next Budget Committee special meeting, December 19th, 2018. Move to approve the minutes as written.
I move to approve the December 19th budget meeting minutes as written.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Not. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Move on to the discussion. I want to add something to the agenda, and that is some suggestions, recommendations regarding the upcoming budget process. These were some of this information was discussed during last year's budget process, and I'd like to just pass this out to people. Could you? Yeah, could you please? Yeah, I got one.
We have you on.
My big mistake is going into the bathroom with it turned on. It's gonna be hard to top that.
Just to let you know, I didn't hear it.
I was just washing my hands, regardless what you may think. You got one? You got one?
Most of these recommendations are pretty straightforward. Probably, you're already thinking about it, but I thought it would be wise to go over them once more. I think, we need to create a strategic budget plan for 2019-20. The strategic plan should ensure it meets and addresses the county's operating strategic plan, which has not yet been written. I understand it's in the early stages of development. And it also should look at the revenue forecast for the county going forward and incorporate those items in the strategic plan to be created by the county, plus the revenue forecast, to come up with these and then use these budget practices to address the budget. One is to assess community needs, priorities, and opportunities. To those services currently provided by your departments, I'm talking about the department managers that are present today and are listening. Resources, what major new sources of revenue in 2019-2020. Currently, there is nothing that has been approved by the Electra regarding any new sources of revenue. So I think unless that changes, the budget process for this coming fiscal year should use that as a guide. Next item is assess capital assets and management systems requirements by identifying issues and challenges in replacement, retirement, acquisition, maintenance without new sources of revenue. A good example would be the towers. Obviously that they need immediate attention. Item 3C would be develop or review all current existing county policies with a goal of improving the fundamental strength and structure of the county's balance sheet and P&L, along with improving citizen support. Sometimes there are policies and procedures that curtail you from doing your job more efficient and cheaply. And I think it might be wise this time, as the budget process goes through its different stages, to look at those policies and procedures to ensure that they are meeting the goals of the county based on hopefully the operating strategic plan that will be forthcoming. And lastly is to identify and summarize possible revenue streams to discuss during the budget meeting in May of 2019, such as shared services outside of the county, fees, licenses, and discretionary tax programs, such as what is the Citizen Revenue Task Force Committee is currently working on, the TLT and taxing restaurant receipts. And I would hope that each department would look at ways of bringing in revenue into their departments if possible. I understand some of the departments, such as accounting and personnel, it's pretty hard to bring in revenue into those departments. But in other departments, it may be possible to do that through increasing in fees or licenses or other possible ways. Any
Mr.
comments?
Chair?
Yes.
Did you write this?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
So the next item on the agenda is to the Budget Committee to questions review. And what I'd like to do this is start with letting the individuals that submitted the questions give a background as to why they submitted their questions to the public and the answers that they were provided. Carl, why don't you start with you?
I took a look at the December 31 numbers, and with few exceptions, most of them were in line with what had been budgeted. taking into account that some of the expenses and some of the revenues are sporadic and not coming in through the year. The answers that I have on the sheet that was given out, my first question was whether we had, as of yet, a calculation of the impact at this year end of the changes that have been made so far in the Commissioner's Office, Economic Development and Community Development, and the answer was that changes in salary distributions are still undetermined at this time. I asked the county clerk simply to let us know, and I understand she will today, where she is in preparing for transition. During the budget hearing, she mentioned to us that she has lost people. There are people scheduled for retirement. I think, one of them may in fact be the county clerk at some point. And she was looking at staffing for that transition. I've talked to her privately, and I understand she will give the report that I find good that she has done that. She has now the staff online and is being trained so that when people retire, there'll not be a break in service, and that those stepping into those positions will know what to do. They'll be fully trained and capable of doing the job. I asked to hear from the assessor where he is on his assessing. We've talked for many years about the number of years it takes to do a complete cycle of reassessment. I just simply wanted Jim to let us know, is he drifting further behind, or is he catching up?
Sure.
Mr. Chair, he's in the audience, by the way.
Yeah, I understand he is.
Answer that now.
Yeah, if that's appropriate, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. And Renee can speak for herself. I think is she here? No, she doesn't need it.
Good morning, everybody.
Excuse me, before you begin, I know a lot of you are wanting to get back to your jobs, so we'll try to get through this as quickly as possible. But I appreciate you participating in this. Thank you. Go ahead.
Good morning, Jim Cullen, Curry County Assessor. Actually, Carl, I hadn't got that question forwarded to me, but it's the answer is we're progressing about the same pace that we were when I spoke to you last, I guess maybe in October or at last year's budget committee meeting. With current staffing levels, we're on a pace to do a complete cycle of the county about once every 17 years. One of the difficulties that really came to light about last summer was when the employees were considering going on strike. That would be a real issue for the county, and I did some independent study into that myself. Basically, all the other 35 counties in Oregon have appraisers in their offices that they use pretty much the same as we do here in Curry County. And so I studied the appraisal position with other counties that are about the same size and population as Curry County. And I found that on the average, our appraisers here are probably around 15% less, or have a compensation package about 15% less than what those other counties are. That's going to get to be a real problem. There recently was a position opened up for an appraiser 1 position in Josephine County. I understand one of my appraisers is considering it. It's an appraiser 1 position, so it's the beginning level position in Josephine County. It already pays more than what he's getting paid. That becomes a real problem, especially with the increased costs of living and the increased cost in housing. Housing is an issue all over Oregon, I believe. However, we probably have as high a cost of living here in Curry County as any place. So Did that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Plus a little bit more, right?
It's always more when you speak, Jim.
It's okay.
Are there any other questions?
No, not for you. Thank you.
Okay. Are you done with me today then?
I think so.
I believe we are.
We're done.
Thank you for,
We're done with you, Jim.
thank you.
My next question was directed to the sheriff, and it was simply, again, looking at the numbers and knowing that we're staffing up and so on. It looked to me like it could be that at the end of the year, he would not need to spend $200,000 of the $481,000 in road funds that we put in the budget. And his answer is not likely. The December report did not reflect the purchase of 4 patrol vehicles, and there's still 3 deputy positions open. And that's the answer I was looking for, was simply, as we sit here, would we have more carry forward, or?
Can I expand on that a little bit?
Yes,
Sure.
please.
Okay, great question. I tried to put some numbers together of what we spent already. So right now, with the 4 cars, the vest, the equipment, the guns to outfit those deputies, we spent about $215,000 out of the $481,000, I believe it was, just ballpark figure. But that's all mostly where it's salary-based things. If we go into hire in a situation now, I want to hire some more people. I do have 3 open positions. It's just hard to find those qualified people, but we're working hard on that. I do have a couple applicants I'm going to be looking at, and I expect that we'll be using somewhere in the neighborhood between $260,000 to $300,000 if we hire the people and get them up prior to the end of this year. So you're looking at maybe $180,000, Carl, maybe carry over with that, or maybe a little bit more. I mean, not carry over. It's money that we haven't spent. We don't get the money unless that we hire those people and get all the equipment needed.
Thank you.
I have a question, Chair.
Yes.
Sheriff, have you come up with or do you know your numbers on how far below the state averages your deputies are paid versus on a consensus of the rest of the counties in the state?
Well, what I'm looking at is, if my memory serves correct, talking with the other officers and other sheriffs and likewise counties, we're about 10% lower than the other counties.
Thank you.
Is this in like counties economically, size?
Size-wise, yeah.
Okay,
Population-wise.
okay.
Thank you. Go ahead, Carl.
I sort of asked for the same type of question with respect to the road department. The road department budget included over $2 million of the restricted road funds being required just to maintain and repair our existing roads. And the answer was not, surprisingly, there will be some savings, but the final amount will not be known until the books are closed. So again, those 2 questions were my attempt to get a sense for how fast we're depleting a road fund reserve that will never be replenished.
Don't say
And
never.
given that the road department requires $2 million plus or minus a year just for the roads, we need to start thinking about where we're going to find those $2 million once the road fund is gone.
Louise, you got a question?
Well, actually, I have a comment that, and I don't know off the top of my head what the budgeted transfer from the road funds was for the 17-18. Actually, I think I might have that. If I get to the road. Oh, it's harder to work without a mouse. I don't have it.
Okay.
But I don't remember what it was, but it was, I know it was over $1 million. Do you remember what it was for last year's budgeted
Yes.
transfer?
I think it was about $1 million.
It's just
And
over a million.
We're projecting to do the same this year.
And we actually only transferred because we only are transferring what we absolutely have to have out of that fund. I don't think I only transferred about 300,000.
By
So-
transferring, you mean to other departments to cover other,
For the road fund.
for the road fund?
Out of the road improvement fund, instead of taking over $1 million, which was budgeted, we took 300,000, just
Okay.
over 300,000. So even though we're budgeting what seems to be large amounts, we're not actually using it. We only use it if we absolutely have to.
I won't take the time now, but the budget book that we're given each year has that, the year we're holding the hearings, year-to-date numbers for those, each line item, and actuals for the 2 years prior to that. So at some point during lunch, I'll look and see if I can find what the book said last year, you know, what we have, tells us happened for the last 3 years.
Okay, good.
'Cause I think it's important to know that.
Chair?
Yes.
You have Roadmaster.
Yes,
Bryant.
Roadmaster, you got a question,
Sure.
comment?
I'd like to expand a little bit on that.
Please do.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, Curry County Roadmaster Richard Christensen. How that works is we project X amount of monies for the work we have to perform. Plus, we also put extra money in rock, road oils, and different line items in case we have an emergency. Traditionally, we always try to roll over money into the next following year. We don't try to spend all the money. It's there in case there is an emergency so we can effectively take care of that emergency. Last year and this year, we received state rural school funds of 1.1 million. So last year we had that rollover. We were not projected to roll over any money, but we were able to because that funding came in. We don't see that money coming again in the future right now, but it came in this year, so we project to roll over that again. And so that all stays in the road fund, and it's part of our rollover process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Carly, any more?
Okay, my last two questions dealt with downstairs, and one was why planning fee revenue seemed to be low through the first 6 months, and the answer was that there was limited staff available during the fall this year, possibly delaying some planning fee activity. I had a matter of interest pending down there most of that time, and the staff was there just wasn't the applications. And to me, that's a problem if our planning department isn't generating fees because people need to do development. We need to worry about that. And that was my concern. The second question was, there have been 2 changes since we did our budget. The building permit fee revenue ought to change because the fees were increased at the end of the year. And there's been a change of personnel, and I asked what the projection was of permit fee revenue given those changes, and the answer I have is the changes in salary distributions are still undetermined at this time. So those were my questions. Again, yes, there are line items throughout these departments that are a little bit more than 50%, a little bit less than 50%, but they're all within the realm of reason of sporadic incurring of fees and things. So I'm frankly very pleased with where we are halfway through the year. I think the county departments are functioning to expectations, and I don't see anyone in these budgets that, you know, the elected department heads or anything that where money is being ill spent.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Pash, you had several questions. I'd like you to go over them and
Well, I
the answers you
actually,
received.
I've already spoken with Ms. Colstrom about a lot of the questions that I had, and she's given me answers. Basically, my questions were, prepared estimates and expenditures for 2019-20, and I was just wondering if department heads had looked forward to that and had started to develop, a plan for cutting and or, you know, their cost estimates for each department. I also had a question on how each department looks at bidding and applicable, and from the board's perspective, the latitudes. And again, Ms. Kallstrom commented to me on a lot of the procedures. Not having any political experience, I'm learning as I go here, so.
On your, if I can back up for a minute, on your question number one, how can you expect the staff to come up with a budget without a strategic plan on what you're anticipating staff to do for the county?
And that's what we've started to discuss with staff, is preparing for a strategic plan.
Right.
I was just wondering if they had started to prepare anything. But now we are going to look forward to, as you know, a strategic plan. I want to move forward with that. I've directed Ms. Schmelzer to move forward with preparations for that. So that is the first step, and then we can look forward from there.
How are we going to go about the strategic plan? I know other counties have strategic plans. In fact, I was looking at one last night. Clackamas?
Clackamas?
Yeah, has one. I thought it was really good.
Go ahead.
Sure.
So strategic planning is something that our county has not undertaken so far.
Right.
There was a survey a couple of years ago, and that is as far as we got. In order to have a strategic plan in place for this coming budget, we're a little late in the process, because to do a proper strategic plan, it actually takes a lot of time.
I understand that.
You also, when you're looking at Clackamas and some of these other counties, you're looking at roughly about $50,000 to $150,000 for a strategic plan. I think what we're looking at realistically, if we want to have something in place for this coming budget session, is more of just the department heads working together with the commissioners and other electeds to actually establish strategic goals for the coming year. That's about as far as we can get due to the amount of time that we have left before the current budget, or the proposed budget.
Meanwhile, you're going to continue with your plan on doing the strategic plan?
Well, that's what I think, like I said, and
Yeah.
when you and I spoke a couple of months ago, I said, in one of the task force meetings that I
Right.
attended, I told you it'll probably take me about a year, but I would want to have a strategic plan, and that's where I think we are now, is it's going to be in the development stages for this budget cycle, but within 1 year, I would love to see this county have a strategic plan in place.
Yes, Tom, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm wondering where the public input is in the strategic plan making, if there's a role for that. And if there is, I'm wondering if the group that Carl chairs, wouldn't be a medium, a way of kind of working with the county on where the county's going. The strategic plan, I think I know what that means, but specifically I don't. And I'd like to know exactly what you mean by a strategic plan. And so
Go ahead.
those are my questions
So a
and thoughts.
strategic plan would involve the public as well. That's that lengthier process, when you're doing the lengthier process. That has public buy-in as well. And usually you're hiring a third party to do that, so it is not influenced by one party or one committee. And we would want people that actually, if we're going to expend the money, I think we'd actually want somebody that does that for a living, to make sure that we are getting what we're actually paying.
Okay, it seems to me that you need a groundwork. You need policy as to what the plan's going to be. You have to have something right from the start that seems it's going to be workable. For instance, are you going to build a strategic plan that depends on future raises in income? Or are you going to build a strategic plan that supposes that income, tax, grants, whatever, going to stay level and you're going to have to downsize? I think this is a wide open topic that, as best as I can hear, has no guidance at all. You're just saying we're going to make a strategic plan, and it needs some direction, I think.
Sure, I'm quite familiar with strategic planning, and when you have these people that actually go in and they help you set the mission, the values, before you even get into any of that detail. I don't think we want to go into anything presuming that the end result is increased wages or something to that effect. So it's an actual process. And the process itself guides the results. So we're not going to go into it assuming certain things. There's actually, like I said, people that do this for a living, where they come in and they actually help you establish the mission, the goals, the values, and that determines where you go. For example, if our value is a safe environment, probably one of our goals would be to enhance our law enforcement. But that is something that is derived as we go through the process.
May I?
Okay.
So who are going to be the parties that set the overall tenor, to answer those questions and decide what the main goal you're going to try to accomplish?
The consultant that works us through that process, if that's the direction the county, if that's the direction the board decides to go.
So the board will
The
set the
board
goals.
decides whether we hire a consultant or not. They do not set the goals. That would be the consultant working with the group, and then obviously, or I shouldn't say obviously, but eventually that strategic plan needs to be adopted by the board. So the board would have the final say on the plan.
Yeah, but wouldn't the board give guidance to the consultant as to the direction they want the consultant to go?
Well, I don't think it would really pay to have a consultant if the board is deciding up front what our end result is. So it's a process, right? This person works with
I
all
understand.
of us to find out what they're
These
doing.
individuals sort of have their hands on the pulse of the community or the county, more so than an independent consultant that might not even live in the county or in the state.
Right? In my experience, if the board already knows what the end goals are, we really don't need a strategic plan.
Sure. go
Yeah,
ahead.
I agree with Julie. The survey we did, of course, that was done, and it was finished, I think, as I was arriving in 2012, made 19 recommendations. It took until last year to implement even one of them, and that's now been undone. So, and one of the first things I did in Curry County was someone sponsored a meeting. It was up in, my memory was up in Port Orford or somewhere, where we sat and we played a board game like, here's a map of a hypothetical county, and you have choices to make, and each table debated what choices to make, and when we made them, we took them, and they gave us an overlay as to the impact of those changes. And I walked away from that with one major question that I think you need to address in any master plan, and that is, are you planning a county for the people who are here now, or are you planning a county for the people you'd like to bring in to replace us? And I think that's certainly a key issue, and I think the starting point is having meetings and town halls, if you will, where people cross sections of the county get involved. The Main Streets program here in Gold Beach is going through that now. I attended one of their meetings yesterday. It was really impressive. The amount of involvement and the very careful way they were moving forward with how to improve the Main Street of Gold Beach. So I think it's a long process, and I think it does take a professional to come in and guide us, someone with experience in doing master planning.
Thanks.
It's my
Commissioner
2
Pash.
cents.
And again,
Continue on.
just to reiterate, because the county's never had one, this is going to be a process, and it is going to take some time. I fully agree with Julie also that we need to, I think the best thing for us to do is give a private entity a direction that we want the county to go, and that will be done through citizen groups advising this board on where they would like to see the county go. I don't think we should be the determining factor. I think we need to take in, other people's opinions on where they'd like to see the county go, and then create a direction that you would want a private company to come in and create our plan.
Okay.
We have a question in the back.
Yes.
More a comment. I never dialed the the county, a number of years ago, paid Les Stiles to come over and do, I believe, with the strategic plan for what the county would be requiring in 20 years. And that, I don't know if you folks have ever looked at that or not, but I think I have a copy of it in my office if you want. I just want to.
It'd be great to send it. Yeah, I'd like to see it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Boyce.
You just mentioned, all three of you, no plan in the past. And so we've committed to that. I'm happy as I can be. I've got a person on each side of me that has very good experience in that whole process. And so I have no lack of confidence that we'll move in that area and get that done. You mentioned strategic goals. That's only the second or third time I've heard that as far as an interim process. So that gives us an opportunity there to bring the county together. Carl, you mentioned being up in Port Orford. You know, this is a very divided county, as you know. We'll need your help to bring the people together, and that would include certainly all of us.
Well, several years ago, Commissioner, one of the first things I engaged with county government was with a county commissioner, and I forget how many meetings we held throughout the county that she chaired, and we brought back, again, a large amount of input. What taxes people wish to have, what activities and the like, and again, that result led to nothing happening. And I think we really need to, if we're going to do this, we need to have buy-in by everyone.
Yeah, okay.
Nobody up here
Commissioner-
served on that board, though.
Commissioner Pash, you want to continue?
Well, I think that's pretty much all of my comments on my questions for now.
Okay. Commissioner Gold, you had some?
I just had
You?
one more comment on a strategic plan. I've been through the process of going through strategic plans previously on other boards that I've served on. And what's happened in the past is a lot of times those plans get put on a shelf and they are useless on a shelf. So we need to have some sort of plan, a workable plan where you're actually looking at it, updating it, that sort of thing. And if you
Sure.
don't find the right person to do it, that's had the experience necessary, you're just asking for problems.
I would agree with that.
But yes, I was part of the committee that did the blue ribbon plan that the DA just talked about, and attended or was part of all the other ones since 2007. It seems to me that each of those plans had as an underlying or a foundation, how are we going to raise the money to get the government we want? And I think the reason those plans were shelved, at least one of the reasons, was that nobody could see a way to raise money. Nobody has started out with a plan where the foundation was, how are we going to make government fit the money we have? Big difference. And I hope that that aspect will be considered when we approach this. There's a reason why those other plans didn't work. I'm not sure I've identified it. But I think there is a good chance the county isn't going to raise taxes. And so they're expecting the government still to work. We just have to face the reality. We have to have a government size that works with the money we've got. We haven't tried that yet. We work toward it, but we're still borrowing money from ourselves, which I'm saying is the reason why we don't have a government that matches our income.
Thank you. Commissioner Gold, you had a question that was submitted.
Well, my main concerns was looking at efficiency within departments, and I know a lot of businesses sometimes have their employees look at ways to be more efficient, and I think people on the ground a lot of times know more what's going to make a company or an entity efficient rather than top down, so to speak. So those were my concerns, that we look into seeing ways that we could be more efficient and cost effective. So.
Well, I know there are a lot of department heads in the audience. Would any of you like to come up and discuss that question that Commissioner Gold brought up, as to how you see your department becoming more efficient or more cost effective? Mr. Huddle?
Well, thanks, Mr. Chair, and I'm trying to just, be mindful of the Budget Committee and its role in the government here at the county. I don't understand the Budget Committee to be a master planning entity, and I think we've been talking about a county master plan now for some time, and my understanding of the Budget Committee is that you review the budget document, and what it says is the Budget Committee can demand and receive from any officer, employer, department any information the committee requires for revision and preparation of the budget document. So unless you're asking for a master plan right now to revise and prepare the budget document that you approved last time, I think we're moving into an area that's not traditionally the purview of a budget committee. From what I've understood, your concern is that we would like to see at the next budget, we're not talking about this budget, at the next budget, some level of planning by the county to justify the numbers. And I've heard favorable feedback, and I've heard limitations from the Director of Operations that what you're likely to see at the next budget is perhaps goals, but we won't have a master plan by then. And I would just like to try to keep the Budget Committee within its scope of statutory duties at this hearing and meetings today. So I would like to try to steer you into a review of the current budget document. As the county accountant mentioned, this meeting is not to discuss a future budget. So that hasn't even been prepared yet. So again, I'd just like to try to see if there's a way to wrap it up and talk to departments about their budget currently and where they are and where they're going. So I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm just trying to keep us within our statutory scope.
But my concern is this is probably the last meeting before the county starts the budget process. We're not scheduled to meet again until April 6th. By that time, the county will be preparing or in the process of preparing the budget, and I wanted to bring the strategic plan up or the goals that could be derived until the plan is put together. Because in last year's Budget Committee meeting, the first day, that was a question that was posed and there was nothing there. It is hard to approve a budget without knowing that if it's meeting the goals of the county and without having some kind of strategic plan or goals that are set up in front of us. As a committee, we don't know if we're approving a budget that meets those goals or whatever goals they are. And that's why I'm bringing this up. But I understand the concern about discussing future budget preparations. But I think it's important that the people that prepare the budget have an idea of what's expected of them so that they can meet the objectives of not only the commissioners, but also of the public, because it's the public that they serve. And they need to have the resources to do that. And we need to understand that. The only way to do that is to have a strategic plan or have the goals so they can be measured upon that and move forward on it. That's why I'm bringing this up at that time. Yes.
Any chance we can deal with the people who are waiting on us, the department heads?
Yes, we're gonna move right on. Court, did you have any questions, Mr. Boyce?
No, thank you.
Okay. Tom, you didn't provide any questions, but I was wondering if you had any comments you wanted to make regarding the current expenditure levels that we're seeing currently in the second quarter?
I didn't have questions because I was out of town for a couple months, so I just didn't check. But it looks to me like everything's on track, and I think everybody deserves a good round of applause. When I look through the percent of budget for 50% of the year, it looks good to me.
Right.
I don't have questions.
Okay. I had just.
Oh,
Go ahead.
yeah, Mr. Hanson handed up while we were sitting here a copy of his facilities plan, 3-year facilities plan with items lined out. And I just want to, those are things we've done?
Those are accomplishments.
Accomplishments, okay.
Okay, we'll get into that because I have some questions on some of the numbers. On the non-departmentals, I had a question regarding allocated interest. That was 241% over budget. And Louise, you had made a comment that the budget is based on historical receipts. Interest rates are up. 6 months of allocated interest, $43,000 to this fund compared to $52,000.
So 43,000 right now, compared to 53,000 for the full year last year.
Okay.
So it's 6 months of interest is almost the amount we got all last year. So interest rates are up. The budget was based on historical receipts, so it was not anticipating an increase in interest rates.
Okay. Do you think this is going to continue on for the next 6 months?
Well, I think so, but I am not a
Okay.
financial forecaster,
Understand.
analyst on interest rates, so I don't know.
Okay. The carry, yes.
Yeah, they've indicated that they are going to raise at least once or twice more in the next year, so I would imagine that they would continue in that direction.
Okay. The next question I had on the unassigned funds within the non-departmentals, the carryover from 2018-19. Well, first of all, it was
Actually,
187 over budget.
That's actually a typo. It should be carried from 17-18.
Okay. So is this a one-time thing on the SARs? And can you explain that a little bit better?
The SRS and the belt,
Yeah.
they came in last year, and we were noticed during the year that we were getting it, and it's 2 years, so it's last year and this year.
Okay.
Those were the one-time, two-year one-time payments.
Can we expect those payments going forward
No, they're last year and this year,
Okay.
period.
for this period? Okay. So that's something that as we prepare the budget for next year, we need to be aware of.
And one of the problems is that we did budget for the PILT money this year. And so next year, we're going to have to reduce that budget by, I think that the budget, I think we put in like $1 million, so next year's budget is already short $1 million because we're not gonna have that budgeted revenue next year.
Okay.
So,
Wow.
you know, those are one-time payments.
The liability account, general liability is over 4,000 above budget, 4,000%. Can you expand on that? Or read your.
Well, we have, was, I think during 17-18, we talked to our insurance provider, and so we discussed a program in which our premiums would be less, and it had a part to it that we pay the settlements and judgments against the county in a certain way. Council probably knows more about how that is set up than I
Okay.
can remember, but what happened was we did go with the lower premium contract last year and this year. Our history showed that we didn't have a lot of settlements and judgments, and so that was at the decision at the time was our cost-saving, good sense choice of our property or liability and property insurance.
Okay.
We have had quite a bad year this year in these settlements and judgments, and so this year is not going well.
Okay.
I also did
Pretty hard item
because
to
that
budget too, isn't it?
that liability line item is actually for insurance premiums, and just to keep what we pay for insurance premiums separate from what we're paying on this part, which is the judgments and settlements. I did have seen it create a separate line item to put these in.
Okay.
Sorry.
Fine. Do you want us to take a break so you can get some water? Sure. Okay.
Can I follow up on that?
Yeah, briefly.
So what we're doing is
She's worried about the pill payments, I think.
we're in the insurance premium line item amounts the county is paid out in settlements until you're changing that going forward, but our year-to-date.
During this last quarter, it happened. So during review, I saw the same line item, and so I discussed it with Sina, and we decided we wanted to keep those, just for tracking purposes of what's happening. We wanted to keep those dollar amounts separate, so we created a new line.
Get some water.
So when we see, at the end of the next quarter, we'll see a new line item there that will let this committee and the citizens of the county know how much the county's paying out in settlements and
You're gonna get
judgments.
Okay. On the next item, and maybe the county clerk is here, the elections. The material and services expenditures is now 70% of budget. Do we have a spending problem, or is it timing of the expenses?
Well, I think the answer to that is the elections department has expenses that are sometimes very unanticipated. Last May, there was a recall election that they had to run that they did not budget for. And one of the reasons that this budget, the copying and printing is so over is because they used, you have the specialty envelopes in your elections, and they're very expensive, and so they were all used during that election. And she says sometimes they have another county to order, so because I think there's some kind of minimum order thing going on, so that they could not, they don't have to have the big expense. They also are going to have a lot of expense this year because the March was not a budgeted election. And so you have the March and May before we get to the end of the year. So we recover those costs. We bill the other special districts, but those will go into revenue lines, and these expenditures will still be over because we still have all these mailing and supplies and costs that go along with elections.
But they are reimbursable by the other agencies.
They're reimbursable, but thank you so much. The expense stays in expense lines, and the revenue does not reduce those expenses. It goes into the revenue
I
line.
understand.
The county
Okay.
will pay part of May because of the TLT being on the ballot, but the March Port Orford Law Department will be paid totally, I understand, by Port Orford.
Okay, and on the assessor's office, the GRT, AT&T grant, I guess that's what that is only 21% of budget, but you're saying that's pretty much just timing related?
Yeah,
All right.
the CAFA comes in. When you get state money, their quarterly payments are not on September 30th. They're usually a few weeks after the end of the following month. So your first quarter payment is usually received in the middle of October. And so the December payment will be received in the middle of February. So right now, what I look at is, have I received almost a quarter of that revenue, and I have, so.
Okay, great. Thank you. The county surveyor is 144% over budget, and you're saying this is a function of annual revenue receipts timing. So it's all timing related?
So which number are you on?
19?
Oh, you skipped down to 19?
Yeah, some of the stuff I'm not gonna go over because it's pretty obvious what happened.
So when that percentage is fairly misleading because it's not taking into account that you budgeted at a negative using general fund dollars in the first place. So if you look at it, just looking at that bottom percentage, when you already have a negative fund balance basically in that department, it looks like it's way over budget. But if you look at it was supposed to be, the ending fund balance is budgeted at negative 17,975, so it's using general fund dollars to support the surveyor.
Okay.
But the current balance is at a negative 25, so the revenues are less than expenditures at mid-year of $8,000. But once again, these are annual revenues, and so they're not coming in like sales come in monthly.
Okay.
So it's not a concern that your revenues are under your expenditures.
Okay, great.
On
I
these
think
kind of funds.
number 21, the sheriff has already answered that question, so I'm not going to go over that again.
Can we address a couple of things?
Yes,
Concerning the sheriff's budget?
sure.
Captain McDonald with the Sheriff's Office. Couple of things I want you guys to be aware of is when you look under the Sheriff's Office in the jail budget, our medical line items, if you look, the percentages are up around 71 or greater percent, probably pushing 80 right now. I talked to you guys about this at our last quarterly budget meeting. Anyways, we currently, just to give you a heads up, we currently have a gentleman in our jail right now that the prescription medication that he's on is $2,500 a month. We pay that stuff, so those line items, as we progress through the rest of the year, are going to get blown out of the water, more likely than not, the ones that deal with our medical services that we provide. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to kind of let the audience know that Medicaid, or what is it called? The Oregon Health Plan does not pay for people who are incarcerated.
Correct. As soon as they come through our door, whether you're on Medicare or Medicaid, and even now some private insurances are saying you're in custody, we're not going to pay anymore. So yeah, it's based solely on the county, and we end up paying for that. So it's just just a heads up. That's the one place right now that I can see, because the sheriff has tasked me with keeping our spending under control. I mean, he's honestly, guys, you got the tightest sheriff I've ever known, sitting right there. And I can probably be a little tighter than him at times. But that's the one area of concern I really have in our budget, is the medical line items. We just did some things to help with some other costs in our medical realm, and hopefully that all works out really well. But we can't control the cost of prescription drugs, and when we get people, yes.
I just have one other question relative
Sure.
to that, and do you know how other states treat these medical expenses for incarcerated individuals?
They pay them.
Okay, so is there any way that we could somehow put some pressure on the legislature to change that? Because I think that's killing us, small counties plus.
Well, it's unfortunately, when you read the ORS in regards to jails, the laws that govern the jails, I mean, it says right in it that the county board of commissioners shall pay for the cost of the county jail. I mean, it's written in law. It's been that way. What we see, though, the only thing that we could try the state legislature is they're starting to put more and more onus back on the county jail through parole and probation, and through, in order to get to prison, you have to have a lengthier sentence now. So people that used to go to prison are now being housed. Some of them are being housed locally, countywide, which then, defers that cost to us. But, that's on a state, that's the state trying to balance the unfunded mandates that they kick down all the time. But like I said, for our budget purposes, I just, that's just something that to be aware of. And the reason why I bring it up is a lot of times, you rob Peter and pay Paul within your budget. But we have things that we budgeted to do that sometimes you can't rob Peter, you just got to pay Paul. But, if that line item goes over, I don't want at the end of the year you guys to come back and say, look, Sheriff and Sheriff's Office, you blew your jail budget out by, $15,000. We still need to do the things that we budgeted over here, but if this one gets way out of whack, I don't want there to be any surprises.
I have one quick question,
Yes.
kind of off topic. What is the maximum length of time that you hold someone that you wouldn't send them to prison here locally?
Statutorily 1 year. Now, if the judge says you've got 1 year for this one and 1 year for that one, and he does them consecutively instead of concurrently, I've seen people in the county jail doing 2 1-year sentences one at a time. So that's a
On your
long-term
question,
stay.
Legislatively, that's the way to go.
Yeah.
Well,
Just to
I can
reduce
see
that
that.
time.
It sounds like they're playing games with the counties as far as.
Yes, Sheriff.
I just wanna
incarceration.
tap onto a little bit what he says. And he's correct. Once they're in custody, they lose all their insurances. But I've asked OSSA to look into it, and there's other sheriffs that have tried, especially Sheriff Swinson up there and Yamaha County, brought this towards the legislature, and it's a legislative issue that, you know, we're trying to get it where when people come to jail and they have insurance, that the first 30 days they're still covered. But like I said, that has to be going through a legislative process. If that's the case, you know, because everybody we bring in is not guilty, they say, until they're proven guilty. So why take their insurance away? That's how I see it. And they come in and they're high on methamphetamines or other drugs, and we pay to get them sober for the first 30 days till they come, you know, they get clean. But nobody else is paying it other than county. Just.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Oh.
Yes.
Thank
Commissioner
you.
Boyce?
Sheriff, before you could, I was gonna try and catch you there, but
That's all right.
polite wise here. Just as you have, if you have an estimate, maybe the last 2 or 3 years in comparison, what it's a growing concern I know in other counties, and it's, especially the rural counties, it's got the potential to, I mean, put them out of business. It's amazing, and the state's not going to help, at least not right now. I don't think that's.
It's a moving target. I mean, there could be years that we spend, say, $8,000 on medical, but then the next year it's $35,000. We don't know because we're required to provide medical to people we have in custody. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And you get a Measure 11 case in there that we have to keep, and he's on dialysis or something like that. That could bankrupt our system.
Okay, thank you, Sheriff.
Okay, thank you. Moving down on other requirements, 35, the balance of the inter-fund transfers of $291,817. My question was that can it be used for the tower repairs? Because towers obviously has been in the highlighted discussion recently, and, you know, coming up with the money to repair that.
What number are we on?
35.
Number 35.
Thank you.
I'm moving down. In your comment was there are 4 inter-fund transfers budgeted, 180,000 transfer to the repair and maintenance building fund is a main source of revenue for that fund. The transfer of the airport was for a grant fund match. This grant has been closed. The 15,500 transfer to the fair fund is required by contract. And the 96,000 transfer to the towers maintenance fund was requested by the budget committee. I remember that, to start building a fund for future. Obviously that can be used. I guess my question is, so you're saying is of the 291,000, only 96,000 can be used for the towers out of that?
Yes.
Out of that. There's no way of applying other funds that have been identified for other things, such as, the 180,000 transfer for repair and maintenance of
We're halfway
building
through the
fund.
year, he's already done repairs and maintenance to buildings according
Okay.
to the 5-year schedule. And to reduce that amount right now would be devastating to our repairs and maintenance for this year.
Okay.
So I don't see taking money away from when he's actually, been doing what he planned to do this year and keeping up with our maintenance schedule. I don't see reducing it in the middle of the year.
Okay. Well,
You can't do that to build a wall either, you know.
okay. The reason I'm trying to find new, existing revenue sources to fund
Well, I
the tower,
understand
and
that,
that's the
but-
reason for the question.
Yeah,
But
I
thank you.
understand that, but I'm not seeing it right there unless you
Yeah.
want to use that future 96,300 that you were going to put away to use it for a current.
Right. In the road fund, number 38 I'm talking about, you mentioned, my question was, I know Carl had a question on the road cap improvement usage. We've already discussed that. And my question was, can we fund the tower repair costs out of the restricted funds and non-spendable funds? And you're basically saying, no, you can't.
No, I'm not sure what you mean by restricted funds, but non-spendable funds are unbudgeted funds and they cannot be spent. No, I don't even think they can be spent with a supplemental budget because they are basically emergency, unforeseen, and
I
unknown.
would consider this emergency,
And-
wouldn't you?
Yes, but is it unforeseen? Is it unknown? It was known at the beginning of the year. It was known 2 years ago. It was known 5 years ago.
Okay.
So, no, I don't
Was that
think
a
it
statutory
qualifies.
requirement to meet that
Yes.
to meet that definition?
Yes.
Okay. So hence, that's the reason you're not using the funds then?
So you can't use contingency funds unless it's an emergency and it's unforeseen and unknown. So if, I don't consider any tower repair to be unforeseen and unknown.
Yeah.
We've been talking about it for such a long time.
Sure.
that There's no way that you could do that, no.
Commissioner Boyce?
We did not foresee one of the dishes getting blown about 40 feet north off the frame. So that wasn't foreseeable.
Yes, it was
Yeah,
foreseeable.
two of them,
that
excuse me, yes.
That those towers could fail. It was foreseeable. In any way that they would fail, it was foreseeable and known. So I disagree that any repairs to these towers or any replacement that we have to do would use contingency funds that you cannot use unless they're unforeseen and unknown.
I see. Counsel, do you have is there
Yeah,
an
we need some
argument to
help.
use those funds?
The board makes that decision on a case-by-case basis in its contracting. Are you saying, so let me see if I'm understanding this correctly. The board did declare, based on the information that court employees provided, that because of the extreme wind event that blew the dishes off and knocked the towers out, we declared an emergency to get some repairs done. And then if I'm understanding correctly, we need a source to pay that, and we would need a budget adjustment. And so then the budget adjustment would come to here. Technically, I don't think the decision of what is an emergency or not is the county accountant's decision. So she can have an opinion, but it's not her decision.
Well, we're talking two different,
Yeah.
the emergency was under contracting law, this is under budget law. I'm not taking a position either way, but there are two different definitions of an emergency, unforeseen, and I think, and, you know, and certainly the amount of money involved is going to be substantial, and it's going to take a budget committee meeting, I think,
Well, that's why I'm,
to do anything.
yeah, that's why I'm bringing
So
it
you
up.
just can't move money around to.
Right, if there's a budget revision, after a certain point, it goes to the budget committee. Some budget revisions do not require budget committee.
Would this be, would the auditors look unfavorably on this, or do they look at when they see the spending out of these funds, do they actually look at what they're being used for? You know? Do we run into an audit problem, I guess, is
No,
my
you
question.
wouldn't be running into an audit problem. However, I think the funding of the proposed tower replacement is a function of the board and not a function of this committee. I
Sure.
wouldn't just think
No,
that.
no, I understand that.
Just-
But my,
Decisions about how we're going to fund that is a board decision. And
yeah. I understand that. Yes. Commissioner Boyce?
Thank you. You've been doing really well, Mr. Chair, on recognizing everyone. The sheriff communicated a situation he had yesterday. You know, when it comes to concerns about the auditors versus what our responsibilities are, and deputies not having good communication, you know, I'm not going to worry too much about what the consequences are if, you know, we spend a lot of time on this, but I think if there's a way that we can be responsible, and I think you kind of started this direction, and I appreciate that. I think that's a serious look we have to take. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, try to get this done quickly. On the Cornerstone Preservation Fund, number 45, there's a budget there for $141,000, but there's no activity. And you're saying the fund has an ending in a transfer budget of 40,000. The only amount needed. You want
Okay, so the Cornerstone Preservation Fund, there's work done by the surveyor during the year on cornerstones.
Right.
And so there is an amount that will transfer from this fund to the surveyor's budget, is budgeted to receive that money in the surveyors. Only the amount that is needed at the end of the year will be transferred. There will not be any activity in this fund until June 30th because
Okay.
the amount will not be determined until then.
So it's a timing
Its
issue.
only function is to collect those fees that cover cornerstone repairs, and then the work is the amount transferred to the surveyors for that annual work.
Okay.
Mr.
Yes.
Surveyor's here, would, Mr. Smith, would,
Louise says is correct.
okay.
Okay.
I know you,
I thought I was right on budget.
no, you've been guarding that fund quite fiercely.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on to 99, I know I'm skipping over some, but I feel that Louise's explanation is pretty self-explanatory. On number 99, road cap improvement fund, restricted fund balances, year-to-date amount is 3.4 million over budget amount. I guess the question was why, and you're saying that at the end of 2017-18, only 393,000 was transferred to the road fund. Only amount needed is transferred at the end of the year with the 2.8 million budgeted. So is this a carryover?
Yes, so the restricted fund balance is carryover.
Right.
So it's carryover from the prior year. So when we did the budget, we basically budgeted to have the carryover be a certain dollar amount, but when we closed road fund, we didn't need $150,000 of what was budgeted to come out of the road improvement fund. So we just, the anticipated ending fund balance for road improvement fund was much higher than we budgeted for. And then, of course, we always budget in a conservative way, so it was basically kind of under budgeted.
Okay.
And then there was a large carryover because we didn't use those funds.
Yeah. That was my next question.
Another thing that I tried to explain earlier, we're only using those road improvement funds as we absolutely have to. So actually, the amount that's in the fund at the end of 2018 is more than it was at the end of 2017 because of interest accruals and basically non-use, although we budgeted to use it, we did not use it.
Okay. You know, on just want to discuss this real briefly. Carryovers, is that indicative of not budgeting correctly, or under anticipating or over anticipating expenses or revenue?
No, not usually.
Okay.
Carryovers in some areas are planned for. So like even like the Cornerstone, we don't plan on using all those funds.
Okay.
So even though we have the carryover, we might not budget for it, or we might not budget to use it and have some kind of contingency budgeted so that you can't or won't use it.
In cases where the carryover is significant, does county government accounting practices allow you to transfer those funds to other departments to offset expenses that were not budgeted in those departments?
No.
Okay.
No. An ending fund balance in one fund, when auditors look at it, they look at that and then they look to see if it has the same beginning fund balance in the next year. They stay within their funds.
All right, thank you. That's all the questions I had regarding the review of the financials. I'm wondering if there's any other comments or if any other department managers that are present would like to discuss issues they see or we haven't discussed yet that maybe the Budget Committee shouldn't be aware of. This is your chance. Yes, District Attorney.
Actually, this is just stuff you guys already talked about, but I can tell you that a sergeant in the Curry County Sheriff's Office makes more than our sheriff does. So you talk about comparative budgets. And so we're low. And I know I'm having trouble recruiting deputies because we're low, but it's also just difficult to get people to come down here for me to get deputy DAs and stuff. And so there's that. And then I think Commissioner Gold has got a good idea. We should be lobbying the legislature so that the Oregon Health Plan continues to cover people in jail. To me, I can't see any reason why the state has the law that says that the counties have to pick up the tab for these people when they come in. Yeah, Sue.
I was just wondering, I know the sheriff said that other states do it differently. Are you familiar with, is it all states do it differently than Oregon, or?
I don't know. I don't know that. I know that it is a huge expense for the jail.
Oh, I know that.
And and then you never know exactly what the expense is going to be, and then they also have to deal with a lot of the people in there have mental illness problems and require assistance.
Thank you.
Madam Gold, I can tell you that all the states.
You have to get up.
Sorry.
Captain.
I can tell you that all the states are the same when it comes to like your Medicaid, your Medicare, if you're on Social Security disability or something like that. All of that's the same nationwide. As soon as you're incarcerated, those benefits stop. In fact, we have a automatic report that goes to Social Security every month that says these are the people in custody, these are the times they were in custody, and every jail in the nation provides that same report to the Social Security Administration, and like I said, and they deny those benefits as soon as they're in custody.
Have you ever challenged the fact, though, that you're innocent until proven guilty, so your insurance should not be canceled until you're convicted?
Me personally, I have not made that challenge.
I mean, the sheriff's
Yeah.
department, have they ever looked into lobbying against that?
We have not tried to take on the federal government on that. I know, and as Sheriff Ward alluded to, I do know that we have tried to get the state to keep their Oregon Health Plan, because that's not Social Security, that's a state plan, to leave that in place. And I know that that's a continuing, ongoing battle. But as far as how the other states handle their individual, if the state has some kind of a Oregon Health Plan that's comparable in the other states, I'm not sure how they shut that off in other states, or if they do, just because I really never looked into that, and that's something I can get an answer to, though. Yes,
I'm just going to make one little comment. I know some COs down at Pelican Bay, and they tell me that their healthcare costs, California is paying more in healthcare costs for the prisoners than paying for the COs.
Yeah, and they actually have doctors that work there, and nurses, and actually, well, yeah, so that helps reduce some of their costs. So
That's.
Thank you.
Commissioner Boyce, you had a question?
Mr. Chair, thanks. Real quick here. This long session, they've already introduced 8,000 bills. I think the deadline for new bills is up, so we would definitely need to get started now for next year's short session. And frankly, I think Curry County could lead the way on that with David Brock-Smith, Senator Hurd, other people. Maybe that is really something we could get serious about. I'd be glad to take the lead there, and maybe we get some relief, and especially the way it's going, trending into the future. Mr. Dial mentioned there, that's we need to get a handle on this. Thank you. And by the way, the work you did on this, that is I know you spent a lot of time on that. I'm sure it comes easy for you, but it's wonderfully simple to follow, and as a commissioner, just greatly appreciated the effort you put.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to,
And just have a question, the line item is under medical, is that the line item that's paying for these in your budget, jail budget, sup dash medical?
There's actually two line items that are for it. Up to the microphone, please. Yep, sorry, excuse me. There's actually two line items. One of them is the professional services general, and then the other is professional services hospital. Or excuse me, there's the professional service hospital, and then we have supplies medical, which is, if you're looking at the actual budget page, it's about halfway down on the materials and services.
I'm just looking because, the budget book does tell us exactly what was spent in fiscal year ending June of 16 and fiscal year June of 17, and what was in the budget anyhow for fiscal year 18. And
Right.
so, it is not a small number.
No.
But we do know a trend here, and hopefully the trend will return to, there were smaller numbers at times in the past.
Right, and as the sheriff did say, I mean, this is a best guess historical look at. This is what it averages. But as we all know, in order to get an average, you've got some low and some high, and it looks like this is one of those years where we may be on the higher side of our average. And the rising cost of healthcare nationwide, whether it's covered by insurance, not covered by insurance, or the best deal that we can get wherever we can get, and that's what we look for. So, but yeah, those are our two major line items. And like I said, according to, in December, we're at 71.1% on one of them. And on the other one, we are at only 35%. But like I said, when we have a gentleman or a person sitting in jail with a $2,500 a month prescription, and that's just one of their prescriptions, that number gets eaten up very quickly. So.
thank you.
I did mention this problem to Senator Wyden once.
Okay. Sherry,
Thank
you have
you.
one more question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes,
Very good.
question? Mr. Barnes?
Yeah, David Barnes. I know that there's a lot of things out there with shared services and cost savings things. I don't know if it would be legal if a bunch of sheriff's associations got together and joined this group to reduce savings by just purchasing in bulk or not, just by having contracts with people. I know that you are all on an insurance policy that includes other people, and you have to get more people together to get price savings on it. So each one of you being on an insurance is something important. And I was just wondering if there was maybe an insurance program out there that the sheriff could join that other people got into as well, or if there was like a shared services type of thing where, buying in bulk, you always save money. And if, all the sheriffs have to do this, then maybe, there's something that could be put together to get them all to save, so help them all save some money.
It's a good idea.
Okay, thank you. Louise, I want to thank you for answering all my questions. Good
You're
job.
welcome.
What I'd like to do is take a recess for 10 minutes, and then we'll go on the next subject, which is the commissioner's salary review.
I have a question before you do that.
Okay.
It was requested that all of the department heads be here, and also that it was suggested that they might want to, during this meeting, schedule them for later in the day. So if we're going to schedule people, I'd like to know who you want to schedule and what time, because otherwise, I don't know if they want to
Right.
continue staying.
I'm complete with my questions, and I think the other members of the committee are.
So they
So
can
this-
all go if they want to.
They can all go. And I appreciate
Thank
them
you
taking their
very
time.
Thanks for
To-
coming,
to
everyone.
attend.
Appreciate it.
Look at them scatter.
So let's recess for 10 minutes, come back at 10:35. Thank you.
launch it. If you're only your best when you can play more than you work. If inspiration comes from the outside, you belong in Curry County. The westernmost point of the land you love, and the edge between familiar and uncharted. Break the pattern. Be where the airports are as close as the beaches, and industry and recreation never cease to amaze. Dock, dive, and dine in a single day, and never lose your connection. This is the threshold of the West. Live where you can do you and do it well, at the farthest point from ordinary. Curry County, living on the edge.
We have these parks which are set up to protect and preserve biodiversity. That's challenging under any circumstances. But it certainly is almost impossible if you don't know what the actual biodiversity that's in your park or the area that you're trying to conserve is.
BioBlitz is a celebration of biodiversity. Biodiversity is the variety of life in an area. We don't know how much life and what types of life are here at Crater Lake National Park. The big obvious things we know about. But a BioBlitz is where we go out and look for a particular type of organism. This year we're looking for beetles, or the order Coleoptera.
The wealth of biodiversity that are in these parks, 99% of it is something that could fit in your hand.
We can't save what we don't know exists. So if there's a beetle species out there that's very important and we don't know about it, we can't do anything to help it. That is the ultimate goal of the BioBlitz. It's a way that citizens can come here. We have volunteers that are here who are actually giving this information. They're using their time to help the scientists build a greater picture of what kind of beetles are here in this park.
Getting this sort of baseline data of what biodiversity is there not only shows us what's there, which is just intrinsically interesting for its own purpose, but it also begins to set a baseline. And that baseline data set is what we then can use, and not just scientists, but the general public and those land managers, the stakeholders in that BioBlitz, can use those observations then on into the future to understand if things are changing.
It's not so much about counting number of species, it's more about seeing a fuller picture of the biodiversity. And the biodiversity is the variety of different types of organisms, different types of species.
I do believe that in their past BioBlitzes that they have expanded the number of things they now had recorded from the park, but also confirmed that some of the things that were reported historically are still present. So even if it's not a new discovery for the park, it still creates another piece of data that tells us, yes, that thing still lives here and is still thriving or maybe struggling, but we begin to learn something about it. I think that has an intrinsic value to the park for its long-term future, but it also just has an intrinsic social value when you ask questions about why do we have these parks. And there's lots of ways to answer that question, but one of them is that the parks are these areas where we go to appreciate the wildlife there. And this is a way of tapping into some of that wildlife at all sorts of different levels. One of the key things besides the biology that's involved in these BioBlitzes is the interaction with the public and the opportunity to educate the public about the biodiversity around them.
The citizen scientists are here working alongside professional scientists, and that allows them not just to connect with science here at the park, but connect with the greater scientific community. It's a real positive thing. We see all ages coming here, and they're just acting like kids out searching for bugs, but they're doing real science at the same time. It's a great connection between this amazing resource and the people that live around it.
One of the things I really appreciate about our entire region is that we embrace who we are, and I think that's what unifies us. Once the timber and fishing industries collapsed, it took us a long time to get back on our feet. People didn't quite grasp the idea that once these jobs left, they weren't going to get other family wage jobs, and it crippled us.
Things were getting really dire. So we just saw that this was an opportunity to maybe look at that public land a little differently and how it could bring more dollars into our region.
The Wild Rivers Coast is so unique because there are more wild and scenic rivers here than anywhere else in the lower 48 states. The scenic beauty is just amazing. There's so many different places to go, from the national forest down to the protected ocean, and it's just a really special place.
I guess I didn't really know how special it was, though, until I moved away to Portland and came back and saw all the potential here.
We're uncrowded, we're unspoiled, and we're a little difficult to get to, but my God, once you come here, you fall in love.
We just thought if we could pull people to come into this Wild Rivers Coast and stay longer and explore a little farther into our backcountry, there was a lot of opportunities for them to experience.
I think our whole future is at stake here. This area is ready to go. We just need to give it a little kick in the butt.
I'm gonna be honest, when the Rural Tourism Studio came here, I was skeptical because I didn't see far enough ahead that we actually could collaborate regionally, and I'm pleasantly surprised. It's been amazing.
The Rural Tourism Studios was the first time we were able to come together as a region to talk about the future of our economy.
If we can have a strong tourism economy in this area, it's gonna benefit the whole community.
We have to rely on ourselves, and I think through this program, it's sort of opened our eyes to what we could do when we work together. Community leaders really focused on 3 areas: outdoor recreation, food and agricultural tourism, and really building community relationships.
In our area, a lot of the food that's grown all gets shipped away. And so now we're realizing that we can capture some of that local food that's grown here. The Eat Fresh and Local Action Team has hosted a series of networking events bringing together the area growers with the area vendors so that we could have more local food available to the visitors to our area. And now we're seeing more local food in our grocery stores, in our restaurants, and we have a new local food co-op.
We created a farm trail from Bandon to Port Orford. We did 9 U-Pick farms, and it just gained traction, and people loved it.
We are back in session. I yield the floor to Chair Ostrowski.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the Commissioner Salary Review. The Budget Committee received a request to review the salary of the commissioners on January 23rd, 2019. And also a request by Commissioner Boyce to replenish retroactively from July 1st, 2018 to January 6th, 2018 in an amount of $10,000 before withholding. The commissioners have requested formally in the January 23rd, 2019 memo to the Budget Committee to request the base salary for their position of $66,469, which is the recommended amount that was submitted to the Budget Committee back in May 7, 2018. I'd like to open it up for any discussions before we decide on the salary. I guess I have one question I have is my understanding of your current salary levels, with the exception of Commissioner Pash, because obviously you weren't here, was that you took a salary cut to fund the county administrator that has subsequently left. And that was a decision that you made during your campaigns, I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, to provide the funds to fund that position. Now, the position has left, it was terminated, and a new county operating officer was hired pretty much at the same salary. So I guess my question is, since you took the pay cut to pay for the county administrator, and now you're asking for it back, but we haven't saved any money by terminating the county administrator. We pretty much remained the same salary. How can we determine, I'm not sure if there's enough money in the budget without going into reserves to handle such a thing. I'd like to hear from you and your thoughts on that. Yes, Commissioner Cole.
Okay, in my campaign, I did promise that I would work for $10,000 if an administrator were hired. And that administrator was hired, and I've kept to my promise, and I won't renege on that promise. Once that position was taken away, I feel that I'm entitled to whatever the other commissioners get. Also, I noticed that the duties have been added to, so that's where I'm at this point.
Okay.
And it's, to be honest with you, it's not the money at this point, in my opinion, it's the principle of the thing.
I see. Okay. Commissioner Boyce? What?
I'm glad we're talking about principles.
Okay.
Because when the previous, or the second, after we had John Hitt, county administrator left, went back to Minnesota, $93,000 was the cost of this county. And if you want me to go through those figures, I'd be glad to do that.
No, that's fine.
I post all those figures.
Yeah.
So it's not a matter of me reneging. As we look at our system of government, twice in this, as you know, Mr. Chair, twice in the history of the voters here, the citizens have clearly said they do not want an unelected county administrator. So I lost on that vote. I was able to work very well with interim county administrator Hitt. So, I think I have a good history there, and I did a voluntary thing not to balance, not to promote the county administrator, but to balance the budget. And I see there's about $250,000 that have left the county the last year and a half since we started this whole process, and it's just staggering. And so I've been here full time. I work 60 hours a week. That's what I signed up for. That's what's required. So what I would offer first is, if I can get this to work, sometimes here's the 26 biggest problems that the county's facing right now. Maybe we could have had former Administrator Schroeder take on every one of these essentially by himself, and we just show up as glorified, forgive me, ribbon cutters or something. I don't know what we at the beginning of the very first meeting of this year with the new board set a job description. And I've taken that very seriously since the very beginning, and and I've been able to match that. But you look at the suicide rates, I won't read all of this.
Sure.
But, this is what this little county's dealing with. And I needed to add what the sheriff and captain talked about earlier. I mean, I was a little bit aware of that, the burden, the financial burden on this little county, but not to the extent I needed to be aware. The South Curry County, and it's really tough to put these in terms of priority, the importance of the citizens of this county, but I've been very vocal in public on the emergency facility that we need in Brookings and how to get there. The growing homeless population, that may be number one, not to be confused with a housing shortage. But going down, we have lost 1 million acres due to fire in the last 32 years. So the log supply, our mills in Brookings that are so critical to our economy, I don't know where they're going to get logs in the next 5 or 10 years. The communication networks, it might be number one in terms of the 26 priorities here. Invasive species, I've spent a ton of time on that, educating myself and trying to help the public be aware of what we're up against there. county road infrastructure, what Roadmaster Christensen is dealing with after the fires, with the budgets he has. I was at Port Orford last night, headed back. Of course, it was dark. The sport and commercial ocean fishing, Oregon Coast Highway 101. Wow, I mean, that's our lifeline, both in visitor attraction and just the scenery and our ingress in and out.
Can I interrupt you for a
Yes.
minute? Weren't these items on the list last year? You know,
I've been working on this for about a year, yes,
Okay.
Mr. Chair, but I'm continually refine it and getting help from some knowledgeable people. I'm also trying to determine, again, that priority. And I guess my point is this, and I would really appreciate the time on this, because my point is if the commissioners don't take on these duties, who in the world is going to? And that's why we ran for commissioner. We care about our county just like the work you did and presented to the board earlier today.
Well, I guess my question, and maybe other people in the community would want an answer, is that these issues have been outstanding for quite a while, and when you ran for election and were elected, you decided that you would take a pay cut so you could hire a county administrator to hopefully work on these issues and so forth. So I don't see anything changed. I don't understand why.
We've been hit by 3 major fires, sir.
I understand
2 of them
that.
mega fires.
Yeah.
And so we're left with that residual. It takes a lot of time. I've spent an incredible amount of time in Salem on the smoke management issue, working with other counties, working with the Oregon Department of Forestry, new forest management policies. There's the next one, if I may indulge the board here.
Sure.
Forest fire, smoke, and associated health risk, rising crime. Your family just today, I mean, we're seeing things even in the city of Gold Beach that we didn't see a year or 2 ago. So what is it, again, it gets back to what is a commissioner's job, and is that a full-time responsibility? I mean, if you talk to any other previous commissioners from this county, I mean, their eyes pop out when they hear that it's not a full-time job, and that's what they signed up for. The timber receipts, I don't know where we are in PILT. We had a rather impressive figure for the last fiscal year. I hope that that's coming again, but there's no guarantee on that. I serve on the AO&C board, the BLM counties, and I just can't afford to miss a meeting. I'm one of those. Wrong. Let's see. Bear with me. Just the damage to the Port of Brookings the last couple of years. We can leave the Chetco Bar and the Klondike fire. I mean, it's just hard. It's almost impossible to measure the damage long term on that to our water, our air, our wildlife habitat. The list. And so, yeah, I'm pretty aggressive on what I think we have to do to change those policies and decrease the odds of additional mega fires, catastrophic fires. We had an excellent presentation last board meeting on the Army Corps of Engineer and the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, their responsibility on the hatchery counts at Lost Creek Reservoir. The Curry County and Josephine County are getting a bad deal there, so we have to go out and we have to be aggressive. Rehabilitation, reforestation certainly speaks for itself. We'd love to get some biomass projects off the ground, but there's some distractions on that. Certainly there's some wonderful volunteers in this community, in this county that are willing to help. Somebody's got to pull them together though. Somebody's got to your point, somebody's got to convince them that their effort and their work is going to be appreciated and have results, just like the 3 of you being here and the time you put in on this. So that's not a conclusive list. As I go back though, I want to offer I can find the... We'll start with the salaries. What is the salaries in this county? And some references made to that today that the sheriff, for example, is getting less than a sergeant in Crook County. I don't doubt that at all. These figures are fairly close. but it gives the public an idea where our funds are going when it comes to salaries. I'm not saying they're enough or too much, certainly not. I think with the direction this new board is going, I think it's we've got a lot of reason for optimism, and I'm more energized than even 2 years ago when I first started. But if we work hard towards economic development, if we work extremely hard to control costs, these salaries can go up. But by virtue of the fact, Monday, I said, there's some people in this building that are a little upset with me because I said, we're going to do what's best for the citizens. You know, the union obligations cost us about somewhere around $170,000. We haven't even settled the road fund yet. And so, is that going to be every year? You know, so commissioners better be on their toes and on the ball. So commissioners are 66,000. That's what it was when I ran. That was the agreement I made with the citizens. Where are we saving money? This position here, the community development director, is gone. We've replaced that with a planning position that I think is going to be a benefit to the county. Here you've got the assessor, the treasurer clerk. A couple of them have been here 30 years. They're paid less than commissioners. I question that. Just for one example, the parks directors, these are just basic salaries. So are the commissioners' salaries somehow out of line in the overall perspective? I mean, we're serving 23,000 people. We have a $7 million budget that we're responsible for. And I'll go down just a little bit further here. These are the boards that I serve on right now. This isn't poor me or look at me or some kind of special person. But as I look at these, I wonder which one and I've asked the previous board, which one of these would you want me to disregard? I couldn't get the other two commissioners in the past board. They're not serving on any boards except minor here and there, not lack of importance, but let's just start right here, the ONC. We got to work on PILT. That is huge, and I've spent a lot of time on that. Sudden Oak Death Task Force. That may be the number. That may be more than the homeless part or the towers. It's hard to gauge. It's hard to determine. But I probably made 11 or 12 meetings on that.
Right.
Okay, so I had somebody the other day say, well, you should volunteer for some of those boards. How do you do? I volunteered when I was in my 30s and 40s and 50s on the Oregon State Marine Board and several other boards. But on the Oregon State Marine Board, I had to travel all over the state. We had per diem. I never turned in a receipt. That's easy to verify. I only missed one meeting in 36 years. So it's not a lack of my personal responsibility to try and volunteer on some of these boards.
That's not an issue. But you know, as I look at these committees that you're on, I think it's great. But the problem is that Curry County is in a financial crisis. I think we would all agree. And for the last 12 months, I haven't seen any action on how to increase the revenue base of this county. By going to these meetings or these organizations, you know, if I could see where by going to that it's going to bring in revenue to the county, then yeah, that's great.
Well, I could talk about each one of these, Mr. Chair, and how that connection needs to be made and why it's critically important to the citizens.
Yeah. But you know, that's
and your point.
About what I'm trying to get at is you're asking the budget committee to increase costs to the county for something that you guys decided to last 12 months ago to reduce because you were hiring somebody. Now you terminated that person, you hired another person at the same cost.
It wasn't a termination, it was a separation.
Separation, I'm sorry. Separation. And you hired another person roughly at the same cost. So nothing has really changed. I don't see how you can justify a salary going back to your regular salary without showing some new source of revenue.
Good point.
That's my question.
Twice in the first 2 years, I asked the board to have an consumption tax advisory committee. And twice I was voted down on that. I can give you a lot of other examples where it was defeat after defeat. I've been sued by the previous board, okay? That's something that I've taken on and had a good attitude about and defeated and stayed the course. And so why would you ask me? I just don't believe the county citizens think that somehow the commissioner's responsibilities shouldn't be properly compensated. I showed you where it is in the scheme of it gives the appearance, though, Mr. Chair, that we're gonna balance a budget on commissioner salaries. If that becomes a part-time job, you saw what happened last 2 years. We lost $250,000 because of bad management. The list goes on, and we can't afford to lose another 2 years. So that's why I'm pretty direct on this. This is, you go to the other counties, you know, the other 5 counties in this area, except for Jackson County, they don't have a county administrator. They have 3 full-time, hardworking, leading commissioners, and they surround themselves with excellent staff. They pay them, they compete to get the best people they possibly can, and they get the work done. We're not getting the work done here. Coos County is, Josephine County is. Go ahead.
Whenever you're done.
Commissioner Patch.
I'd like to comment on something that, as far as what I believe, and maybe Mr. Boyce can expound on it. As far as I was to understand, his salary reduction was for the first year he was in office. He volunteered that. And he vehemently, I can't even say the word right now,
It's okay.
asked for that restoration for the fiscal year of 18-19, which was denied. It was a volunteer thing that he did the first year, but the second year he asked for it to come back and it was denied. And that's where you may want to expound on that.
Well, it's just true what you say. It's really quite simple. What works, though? Again, it gets back to the question of what is our responsibility? What does the compensation board say that offers work? If you compare us to Tillamook, Jefferson, like size population counties, I mean, the work's been done. I didn't come on this job, and by the way, when I'm done, I'll be retiring and serving on a lot of boards, God willing, and the examples that you have all set. But this notion that somehow, and again, if I can't get help on these boards, and I can't say no because they're too important to the county, and I'd appreciate it if you'd let me give a little detail on each one, and I can tell you how the revenue can eventually, by work that's not been done the last couple of years, can come back to the county. So, Coos Creek Business Douglas Development. I served on that board back in the 80s when it first was established. Here's the connections to that board. I won't read them all, but every one of these boards, whether it's coastal issues, whether it's Eastern Oregon issues, you know, I got mocked because I went to county college. It was a bargain for the county. I got mocked by this board, and yet the relationship I have built, you know, it's really been helpful to this county, and I think DCO Director Schmelzer can probably offer some insight on that. Association of Oregon Counties, I rate that kind of high. That's just a 1 month. Well, sometimes this time of year when the session's going, it's a couple times a month that I would need to be there. Or Chair Pash, I don't think that Commissioner Gold has shown any interest in this, and I think that's unfortunate. I'm going to keep challenging her respectfully. Southern Oregon Workers Investment Board, they have the best food. But the more I see this organization and the benefit to the county and the people I'm working with there, the more I want to not miss a meeting and get there. Sure. Travel Oregon, Southern Oregon Coast, that's going to be twice a month. Curry Community Health, that's probably been a dozen, well, no, I would say 9 or 10 meetings that I've made in the last 2 years. Oregon Coastal Zone Management Association, we've talked about that. Certainly coastal issues. I've only had 1 phone conference on that so far, but the Southwest Commission on Transportation, that has everything to do with federal and state fundings for our Highway 101. Roadmaster Christensen was there, and I'm trying to get him as our alternate on that board because I think it's that important for any time Curry County's not well represented, which is the case a lot of times because I'm the only one that goes after it. I don't think I have any choice to say no. The Gorse Action Committee, Wild Rivers Forest Collaborative Committee, I've probably been to at least 8 meetings in 2 years. I won't expound on how important, I think that speaks for itself. I've been asked to serve on the Advanced Health Care Council. That's the money that comes from Oregon Health Authority to Curry Community Health. And so that's meetings in Coos Bay. It's going to require some travel.
You know, of
County administrators can't serve on these boards.
Right.
They don't have a vote. Commissioners have to do it. What would you do if you were me? Walk away and turn your back and you say, somehow, darn, I got to get there. And that's what I've done consistently. I should be paid for it.
I'm not questioning your willingness to help the county out, but looking at those organizations that you attend, of all of them, which one is most likely to help the financial position of this county?
Sometimes I think that's the question that needs to be answered, and I appreciate that. Coos Curry Douglas Business Development, they have a lot of money. They have a lot of expertise. They have a lot of commitment to those 3 counties, and so when it comes to economic development, solving our housing problem, I showed you a list a minute ago, their connections with various other agencies and committees around the state. They just have a lot of horsepower and some incredibly wise, well-educated people. The ONC counties, I mean, that's once a month that we meet, plus we do a lot of phone, and they are fiercely trying to protect our forest, to have proper sustainable harvest for all the mills in Oregon. I'm just honored to be on that one. I'm really surprised I was even asked, but there's only 12 on that board, and it's a very dedicated, very determined board. So the Transportation Committee, if we don't have a Curry County representative, we'll lose out. Gary Millman is the chairman of that board, by the way, and he called me up 2 months after being in office. One of you commissioners have to get there, and he really encouraged me on that. So, Travel Southern Oregon Coast, they have about a $500,000 budget that needs Curry representation. At some point, I believe the other commissioners can take some of this role, and I can go on to other things certainly related to that budget.
The summary. Okay, thank you.
I got more, but that's okay for now.
I understand. Do any other committee members have any comments
I
or
have some
questions?
comments. As you probably know, when I initially ran for this office, it was a paid position, and that's what I was led to understand that it was. During the process of my running, the commissioners changed that. I think it's a historical thing that commissioners have been paid. I believe that what's been presented to the Budget Committee is an average of what is historical for the state. I think it's fair that commissioners get paid for doing the services, full-time services that we do. We all have bills to pay. And I can't imagine that if the electors in this county didn't want to see me get paid, I don't believe they would have put me in office. I think they want full-time commissioners that are willing to sit and do the job full-time, whatever it takes. And for that, they understood through my campaign that I would want to be reimbursed for those services. I can't imagine that myself or any of the commissioners would be punished for one commission's request to reduce their salaries. I don't think that should all of a sudden become the historic standard for this county. Those are my comments.
Okay, thank you. Carl, you have a question?
Let me start. I look around the room and sad to say that I have the most experience of any of us in this budget process. I have served on 3 budget committee hearings. Prior to that, I attended at least 2 or 3 budget hearings. And as the 4 people sitting here, I used to look around the room and occasionally comment that I was the only taxpayer other than someone on the county payroll who was attending a budget committee hearing. So I've participated in or watched 5 or 6 budgets. And I had been looking forward, and I still do perhaps, to continuing that participation. I have viewed my responsibilities and my duty was and is to the taxpayers of the county, not to the Board of Commissioners. I was unable over the weekend, notwithstanding my experience with the budget book, to come up with what I was certain was an actual accurate count of county employees, given the way we parse people and scatter them around. But right now there are 100 to 110 county employees. 70 of them work for elected officials other than the Board of Commissioners. 20 of them work for the road department. It's my humble opinion that none of the current elected officials really need any help from the Board of Commissioners in running their departments. They have done it for many years. Most of their staff have been there for many years. And frankly, I don't think the roadmaster needs help, or any of you are qualified to help him run a road department. So I look at this as being asked to set increased salaries for 3 positions that total $199,407 on an annual basis. The only way to look at this is on an annual basis. You add a director of operations at $84,000. So there you're at $283,407. I won't begin to understand how PERS is calculated, but it's at least 10%. Some of the departments paid more than that, but it's much more. The other deductions for FICA and the like is more than 10%. You add $43,000 in health insurance benefits. On an annual basis, it's now $30,000 for travel. That's $400,000 a year for the direct supervision of 20 employees, most of whom have been county employees for many years and are capable, qualified individuals that can do their job without supervision, as far as I'm concerned. They need some, yes. I simply cannot, in good conscience, tell the county taxpayers that it is a good use of their tax dollars to give this increase. I can't tell that to those people in this county who are getting the average Social Security check. I did the math when that came out, and the average Social Security recipient in the United States gets between $16,000 and $17,000 a year to live on. That's less than what you'll have as a travel budget. And I certainly can't tell that to a family that needs help feeding their kids when they're not in school, getting school lunches. I'm tired of reaching into my pocket time and time again to make donations so that kids eat during school vacations. Just can't do it. I was appointed to this budget committee for a specified end date. I don't serve at the pleasure of the board. I fully have appreciated and enjoyed being on the budget committee, and I may not see another budget hearing, but I certainly cannot vote for this, and I will not vote for it.
I have a question.
We haven't voted yet. Yes.
What increase are you speaking of? Are you speaking about Mr. Boyce's increase or my increase, which I'm being paid, I think, $10,000? And there's definitely a huge disparity between, you know, the pay between commissioners. So which increase are you speaking?
I'm not talking about an increase, Mr. Pasha. I'm talking about increasing things so that the total cost to the taxpayer on an annual basis is $400,000. I don't think, I cannot, in good conscience, justify voting for that.
Mr. Chair, you had a question in the back.
Yes. Mr. Barnes?
I'm David Barnes. I'm just sitting here listening to all this, and there's two things I really need to point out to you. One is that Commissioner Huxley, when he took his $10,000 salary, did so long before there was any talk of having a county administrator. He volunteered to do that. Commissioner Gold came in and, as she has said many times, agreed to do it for the $10,000. If there's been this was volunteered money. You know, this was a volunteered reduction in their salaries. Number one, Commissioner Pash, I don't think that he should be held to Tom Huxley's volunteer to take the less money. He should be paid what the salary was before Commissioner Huxley took office. And the second thing I want to bring up is that after listening to Mr. King, what you just said, I'm just amazed at how I don't know the words to use, but when you sit here and tell us that these people are only going to have 20 people to manage for $200,000+ a year, you sat at this table last year and approved a budget for a county administrator who would come in and do the exact same thing that you're complaining about these people doing. You know, that to me is absurd. I'm sorry. Like I said, I don't know the right words for this, but to me it's very disingenuous that you now sit here and claim that all these county department heads and everybody else is able to do their jobs, when last year your claim was that they can't be trusted to do their jobs, and that's why we need to bring in a county administrator. And I just think it's a bunch of hudda.
Well, Mr. Barnes, I won't use pejorative terms or personal attacks. I see a director of operations who is making within $2,000 of what the administrator did, and I'm fully prepared to believe that she is as capable of administering county employees as Mr. Schroeder was. And it has, again, I simply, as a budget committee member with duties to the taxpayers, I cannot justify the end result of this pay raise. And you can call me all the names you want.
It's not a pay raise, sir. It's a restoration.
Well,
that's right. To
what it
was before you came around.
It's an
Mr. Strauss?
increase.
Yes.
On Mr. King's comment, though, we also had a director of operations. It wasn't titled that at the time, but Ms. Schmelzer was in the employee of the county at the time as well, and her position was basically done away with. What I felt was to pay for the county administrator. So it's a matter of semantics, however you'd like to divvy up the money. But her position was already there when talk began about a county administrator.
There were actually 2 positions that were eliminated.
Okay. Thank you. Do you want to speak?
Nancy Sue Rose. First of all, during the campaign, Sue ran on, Commissioner Gold ran on getting a county administrator and taking $10,000. She did not run on being a part-time commissioner. She was not a part-time commissioner. Some of her work and some of Tom's work was done from home. That does not mean they were not full-time. They did not say they would take $10,000 for a part-time position. They were still doing full-time work. And I remember being at the League of Women Voters forum in Gold Beach when boys kind of reluctantly promised that if we got a county administrator that he would take a $20,000 pay cut. He did not qualify it for 1 year. I was there, other people in this room were there. They remember that. And I don't know how, Pash, you didn't know that it was a $10,000 permission. I, a citizen who just comes to these meetings, not every time, but you know, most of the time, recently, and for the first year, not this past year, but the year before, I was here every day, every meeting, and I came to the whole week of the budget meetings that year. It lasted longer than a week. I was there every hour. So for you to say you didn't know that it was a $10,000 position, I'm just kind of wondering how you didn't know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Somebody can make
Yes.
a motion.
Yes.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Chair. Just during his remarks, Budget Committee Member King said that he was appointed for a term of years and doesn't serve at the pleasure or the will of the Board of Commissioners. And I think that's actually an open question. So I really don't want to have that just go unanswered.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Huddle, I accept that. I will tell you, I've looked through not every year that there are records in the Commissioner's Journal, but the Board of Commissioners, for at least since the 90s, have understood that they have the ability to make appointments that are specifically identified as at the pleasure of the board. And they have the ability to make an appointment for a set term and a set ending date. And they have never made any appointment to the Budget Committee that has been other than for a set term to a set date. And I fully understand that that is not going to have any impact as to whether I am sitting here in May when the budget hearings resume.
Mr. Ostrowski, you have
Yes.
one more in the back.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Brian Grumman, and I've been working on a committee to help the finances of the county and look at a lot of issues. I guess I also look at this from my experience, and I did turnarounds all my life. And every turnaround I came into, scenario was very similar to what I see here. And that is people that were competent, qualified, getting good salaries, but yet an organization that they were part of could not afford the full amount of money that was being paid. You know, I don't want to have people feel it's personal from my perspective, but I'm saying that the county can spend so much money. I know that every dollar that we spend in the county decreases somebody's standard of living in the county. If they pay the county for money, that's food they didn't buy, that's a present they didn't buy for somebody. It costs every single person in this county every dollar we spend. I'm not saying that they shouldn't get the money, but I'm saying that if we spend the money on the commissioners and we look functionally at what we're trying to do here, we're spending a lot of money for basically a fixed function. Does it take 4 people to do a job that one person could do? And I know that, Court, you and I have talked a number of times about your value. You are valuable to the county. So are you, Mr. Posh. So are you, Ms. Gold. But I look at the amount of time I spend, I get no money. I'm part of workforce. I spend driving to Coos Bay, driving to all these different places. I have never submitted a bill for $1 to the county or to the state. There are people that need to contribute to their environment to have a place to live. And I'm not saying you all are in a position where you can contribute your time and effort and not be compensated. But if some of us don't do that, the county can't survive. So I think we have to be very careful about where we spend our money. We have to realize that every dollar we spend is coming out of somebody's pocket here in the county. Now, we've talked about a number of ways to raise additional funding. But before we go out and raise additional funding, and I admit we have to raise additional monies, we need to make sure, as a county, we have been as cost efficient and effective as we can be on every dollar we spend. If we're going to go out and talk to the taxpayers in this county and raise money, we better have a good story to tell them. We better show that we've done our job, we've been as cost effective as we could be, and we are giving them every bit of value that they're spending on the county. So that's my only comment here. I'm not making a comment. I know that every commissioner in the state of Oregon basically is somewhere, with a couple exceptions, is somewhere in the $50,000 to $90,000 range. It depends on the size of the county and everything else. I'm not arguing about the salary for the commissioners. I'm asking you if this is the proper government that we need here in this county, if this is the government that we can afford. I look at the hospital, it's got a board of it has the board of directors that are unpaid, that do a wonderful job and manage that hospital. I look at the library, same thing, unpaid board of directors, manage that library very well. It's doing wonderful things. And we have good administrators in both those, basically both those environments that are doing their job with supervision of a strategic and, if you will, philosophic nature. There's no hand-on management with any of those boards of directors of people in those organizations. I would like you to think about the possibility of having a group of commissioners that act like a board of directors, that have an individual that manages the county, where they provide information on a strategic and philosophic nature on the management of the county. If that wouldn't be a more cost-effective way of doing it. I'm not saying you have to do it. I hope you think about it. I hope you consider it, because I hope you also understand in your positions, you have the responsibility of minimizing the cost to the citizens of this county for what they receive. And if your salaries are the best way to do it, I have no problem with that. I'm just asking you to be considerate, thoughtful in your deliberations on how you manage this and how you spend the money. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one more comment.
Sure.
Mr. Chair. I will say only one was in my, since I've lived here, but there have been 2 votes to the citizens of this county. Should they have an administrator, a person that runs this county, or should we continue with a board of commissioners on a paid basis? On both of those occasions, it was voted, I believe one was 72% to 28, the other one was 62 to 64% versus 34 to 36. That they wanted to have a board of commissioners seated here and not an administrator. So I think from that aspect, the people of the county have spoken. I agree with you, Mr. Grumman, that I hope to have a long and great relationship with you, and I appreciate your comments. I will say, though, that the past board that was here, and this is just my observations, never looked at resources to bring into this county.
Sure.
I believe you now have a board seated that is going to look at resources to the county. I believe we have brought someone in Ms. Schmelzer, that her forte is going to be helping bring resources to this county. So whether the vote be yes or no on our pay, I would hope that this board in 6 months or a year, when we revisit this, will see the financial contributions that this board has made to the county.
Okay. Mr. Gould?
I kind of want to make a correction. The vote that the people gave 2 times was on a charter, and it wasn't just an administrator. It was a whole different form of government. So personally, I ran on getting an administrator, and I won by a substantial margin. So that's where I'm at. But I just think that correction needs to be made.
Okay. Yes. Louise?
I don't really want to speak to Commissioner Gold or Commissioner Boyce, but at the budget meeting last year, when I started talking about having a budget for the second half of the year, knowing that Commissioner Huxley was not going to run and that we would have a new commissioner, and I wanted to put a budget in place for them to get the full salary for the following year for half the year. And that's when the budget committee said, no, we're going to keep it at 10,000. And I found that, I just thought that was horrible. Why would you keep an oncoming commissioner who made no such promise of having, or no such volunteer of taking 10,000 a year? Why would you force that person coming in to take what another commissioner voluntarily did? And I still find that hard to believe that you would do that. These commissioners, no matter how much they get paid, are considered full-time. And if you restrict the salary that you're going to bring oncoming commissioners in at $10,000, you have restricted the people that can even run for this office, because if they're 10,000, they'd have to have a full-time job. If they have a full-time job, they can't be a full-time commissioner. So the only people that you're going to get in here is people who are independently wealthy or retired. And that doesn't give every citizen in this county a chance to become a county commissioner. I find that hard to believe also. I'm not going to speak to the reduction in salary to Mr. Boyce or the voluntary reduction in salary from Ms. Gold, but I do think you should consider the full salary at least for Commissioner Patch.
Tom, do you have any comments?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I've got a point of view also.
Okay.
It's kind of
You're part of the committee.
a
Speak.
little bit of what everybody has said. But I'd like to, if I can, you said something that I don't fully understand. When you first spoke, you talked about funding an administrator and then you would take a cut.
That's right.
And what is your position?
Well, the administrator position was wiped out, basically. So I figured if it's wiped out and my duties have increased, then I should not take a lower salary than everybody else.
Okay, so may I ask you some questions on that?
Sure.
Can you tell me what the rationale for hiring Mr. Smeltzer is?
That I can't, because I had really no part of that. It was pretty much done before the other two commissioners came in. It was basically done the first day that Commissioner Pash came in.
So do you see that as a parallel, a corollary, synonymous with the administrator's position and duties?
I would
to
say
accomplish
pretty
something that he
much, with the exception of being able to hire and fire at will.
Mr. Boyce, I want to question you about something that you put online, where you're talking about county priorities. It's titled Kurt Boyce's Plan for the Curry Recovery. And it starts out accounting dash fiercely protect the interest of the taxpayers, every penny, every budget, every year, ... zero waste, and 2 exclamation points. At one point in here, you said, forego $20,000, and then in brackets, a good faith offer toward a partial salary for a county administrator, in the brackets, a chief administrative officer. Further down, you talk about economic development funds. It says, take that money out of the hands of the commissioners, put it into a local volunteer industrial economic growth board. We should not invest with our competitors in Cruz County. That seemed to fly opposite of what you said earlier.
That would be referencing Mr. Brandt, the FCDC group. And my initial thoughts on that, I think at that time the county was paying $20,000 out of lottery funds. And so I felt, and we had just lost our economic development department. I had hoped that we could bring it back into the Curry County responsibility. And then we changed that to $10,000, if I recall. And the more I get to know the people at SCDC, I'm more relaxed with them. Former Administrator Schroeder, arbitrarily, without even telling the board, just decided not to do that with SCDC. So am I answering your question there? As far as
I think so. I think it's probably, yeah, it's a reasonable, good answer. I guess I thought I heard you say that you wanted to work with that group, and it seemed to be opposite of what I was reading.
I've actually attended about 3 of their meetings in the last 2 years. All have been at Coos Bay.
I went through the Association of Oregon Counties. You're all probably familiar with this. Do a survey of all the counties. That survey has got a lot of interesting information in it. Financial, job positions, pay, something about whether they're full-time, part-time, and so on. And in my mind, it goes to the fact that each of our counties in this state is different. It's unique. It has an economic base, a cultural base that's different one from the other. It's really hard to say averages of and have that be a meaningful value, because we're averaging all kinds of differences that don't apply. What it amounts to is that each county develops a way to get through life on its own. And so what I'm going to say now is not to compare us with that, but to talk about the potential, the possibilities of how the county, how it can go, what its long-range plan can be, as we talked about earlier. And I admit I have a mindset, and that is, after thinking and working really hard, as much as an individual can do to try to get the county to raise money, get citizens to raise money, I'm seeing life differently. I think that's a hill that we're not going to climb successfully. So with that in mind, the summary of going through these counties, the AOC, the Association of Oregon Counties, survey did, is that of all the counties, part-time commissioners show up in 13 of the counties. Of all the counties, administrators show up in, I believe, 27 counties.
No.
Of all the counties, 4 counties have joined together to do a jail. That's something we've talked about here before. Apparently it's not possible for us, but they're combining with other counties to I suppose, cut overhead and try to provide service that is good for all of those counties without the expense being duplicated. Some counties do not contribute to recipients' portions of PERS. That's probably not possible given the way things are, but it does show that counties have approached things differently than we're doing. Some cap medical insurance benefits. Some administrators serve as, for instance, a financial director, veteran service director. What, to the point of the discussion now, when we talked about funding the county, as we're told in our material from the state of Oregon, that revenues should match expenditures. And we see that we're not doing that. That our revenues always our expenditures always exceed our revenues. And that the long-term outlook for that doesn't appear to be changing, and it is not good. It led us to look at something we haven't tried before, and that is to cut spending in the commissioner's office. We also considered either doing away with or combining the treasurers. Is that correct? That never went anywhere. The issue was compounded because it appeared to be taken as a personal attack on the commissioners in some quarters. But I think the reality was is we were looking to save money as non-governmental people on this board, on the budget committee. We did actually save a little money, I think. It wasn't much, but we saved one, and it looked like I was somewhat optimistic about that. And I'd had some support from 2 of the commissioners to have it administrated. The fact that we now have the chance to undo that, when we worked and thought we talked through the issue fairly well, just presents the same difficult situation again. How do we run the county from non-government members of this budget in a way that decreases costs, makes the revenues and the expenditures match? And it also has that attribute of being a personal thing that makes everything difficult. I've heard some compelling arguments for why we should pay, but I know there are a lot of instances where government is run by people who aren't fully paid and fully compensated for their situation. I think Brookings, for instance, has its meetings and people can work during the day and meet at night. They seem to be financially doing just fine. And we can go on and on and on with examples of that. So when it comes time to vote, I'm going to vote in a way that pretty much maintains what we started the fiscal year with. And we'll revisit this again as a budget committee. Just one other thing is that in the future, it might be interesting to consider that one of the commissioners, after getting 2 years of experience, becomes a county administrator, and that continually rolls over. And that's a full-time position. The various ways the counties handle that is quite diverse. We're locked into doing things as custom, but part of our custom that we always leave out of the story is the fact that we used to get money from the federal government. That made it easy to run government. We didn't have to have these discussions. That custom's not here anymore. And to pretend like that's not an important part of the history or the future of our county is just not being realistic. So, thanks for indulging my monologue.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I think you have a lot of people still want to speak. We have a half hour, and I hope we can, I want to encourage you. My preference is to keep the dialogue going. I think there's some production here, and I think I'm grateful for that. And I'm ready to speak again, but I think we have other people that might be before me, and the sheriff is.
Sure.
Yeah, I just have a comment. Historically, there's always been 3 commissioners, and they all get paid a certain salary. I support the commissioners getting the salary that they ask for, $6,000, whatever that number is. But, and no disrespect, Commissioner Boyce, when you were giving your demonstration about the salaries, it showed that the sheriff was getting $92,000. That kind of threw me back because I didn't think that was correct. So I went out and checked, and somehow maybe the numbers got transposed or whatever, but I'm not getting $92,000 salary. My salary is $88,000.
Well, that's very good to know. I appreciate the correction on that, and I tried to preface it by, might be off a little bit, but.
Yeah. But I want to just add a little bit to that. The only reason I'm getting $88,000 because the county's not contributing into my package of for the PERS. If I was to get back in the PERS, my salary would be $76,000. So I just want you to be, there's been no increase in the sheriff's salary or other elected officials' salary. There's been requests by the elected officials compensation board that everybody should get this amount. And recently we have a huge compression issue in the sheriff's office, for a matter of fact, with the union and the non-union representative. If I was wanting to promote one of my sergeants to lieutenant, I'd have to give him a pay cut. And that's just not right. My sergeant is running the jail. He's a jail commander, the only sergeant in the state of Oregon. The other ones are lieutenants or captains, and they have a little bit more authority to do that. And in order to do that, to run a jail, you have to pay them. So we addressed that here a couple weeks ago with the non-representatives. They gave them a 2.5% COLA increase to try to catch up to get past that compression issue. And I thought the elected officials were be part of that, but come to find out, I found out today that I don't get no 2.5% COLA increase. So it has to be fair and equitable across the board. And I just want you guys to be aware of that. And I'd like to, at least the commissioners should be getting a cost of living along with the union representatives as well.
Okay, thank you. Any more comments?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner
Thanks.
Boyce.
Mr. Brandt, you made an excellent point there with neighboring counties. I'm always jokingly, but sometimes tongue-in-cheek, saying, would you adopt Curry County to both Josephine and Coos County? I've worked very hard to build relationships with all the commissioners in this area. I've not had any help in that aspect, but your point of Eastern Oregon County, some of them only have 5,000 people in their counties. Okay, so that may be a reasonable comparison, may not be. But I think down the road, you're seeing, for example, Commissioner DeYoung was here from Josephine County the other day, and he's working very hard for multiple counties in the marijuana initiative that has a reasonably good chance of passing down the road. Back to the 2008 and the 2014 ballot measures, the home rule aspect, you also made another point. People want elected officials that are accountable. And that's why the other counties have not changed to a home rule charter. That's why our voters, very, very convincingly, Commissioner Gold, I'm not sure why you won. I think you won by 500 votes. Congratulations, that's good. And I'm very happy that you're on board now for full time. And as I jokingly said to both you and Mr. Pash, one of our first meetings of the year, said, I can load you up with responsibilities. Klondike Fire, the sheriff can verify, I think I only missed about 3 meetings from July 22nd, 6:30 in the morning meetings, to October 14th when the fire flew up. So I don't mind the volunteer part, but I think that goes a little bit above and beyond. And I offer that in the sense that the citizens need to know, because nobody knows that I was there, or except the people that were working intentionally to try and correct that. I don't think I had an option not to be there. The other commissioners were not involved. Real quick here on this. This is what's happened the last couple of years, maybe the last 4 years. The Todd Weeks lawsuit, retraining new employees, we've lost exactly 99, maybe it's 100 now, 101 employees in that 4-year period. If you just took an average figure of $1,000 and said, hey, this is what's going to cost to retrain, there's 100,000 right there. The gold votes for Curry Financial Impact, what follows, it's somewhere around 225 to 300,000. Here's where we are. Quickly, 93,000 for the Schroeder experiment. The amount of staff time that we've had for the lawsuits, the decorum bent, all the discussion continually on minutes, the personnel rules, no help to raise revenue, no help to get me to raise revenue. There's the votes right there. 71% voted against the home rule charter, not taking away the right of the citizens to elect their representatives. 63% in 2014. This is a tough estimate here, but the losses in the community development in the last 4 years. I mean, one time we sent out a $6,000 mail out on the liquefaction. It was the most well-attended meeting we've had in the 2 years I've been here, the people that spoke against that. The point is this. When you have part-time commissioners, this is the kind of waste I submit that this county has dealt with. You can check all these figures relatively easy if you ever want to help. And I sent you all this information earlier. 5,000 on the Dunn Carney law firm to the lawsuit, the county annex break. Here's just a simple one, and I'll conclude with this. In an executive session, I asked the board if we could spend $1,000 to bring security cameras back in this building, because we didn't have them. I got voted no, and since then, this building has been broke into 3 times. Now, that cost a lot more than the $1,000. Back to my point of being defeated and staying with it, and then the Bischoffs, 21,000, the 30,000 of Prothman advertising for a county manager. I mean, it's well over 200,000, maybe as much as 300,000.
Okay, I understand.
My job is to control the costs. I voted in opposition to every one of those issues, and I'm sorry that we're here today. Very sorry.
Brandt?
2 things. You said something about home rule count not having commissioners or not having public input. I don't understand that.
Oh, I'm sorry. The other counties?
Well, you said
They
all
run the same,
counties,
they're general law counties, just like we
they
are.
were voted down because the public didn't have a way to
Excuse
get
me.
that county through commissioners.
Because they want the right to vote for their elected representative.
Still have commissioners. Some of them have 5 commissioners. that they
Understand?
voted for.
And you know, we've talked about that, Brian Grumman and I've talked about that. You have mentioned that in the past, that might be, maybe that's the way we want to go, but it has to go for the citizens, I think, again.
The other thing is that.
And I wouldn't rule that out.
Every one of these things that you just talked about was done by the board.
Mhm.
You all had a chance to vote on it. You can't.
I voted in opposition to every single thing there. The record is clear,
Well,
Mr.
I don't
Brandt.
have to know what, you're trying to tie that into part-time commissioners, and I don't understand that relationship.
What's the bottom line here? How much money did we lose in the process there? Why would you not be interested to understand the extent of
I
that?
just wouldn't tie it to part-time commissioners. I don't see the relationship.
Would you tie it to a dysfunctional board?
I don't think it really matters, but
Well-
that might be closer than saying part-time.
I think the bigger question is what action took place to remedy this? Was there any action by the board to remedy
It's
this?
hard for me to bring this up before the board right now. That's the action I feel I have to take, or we'll have another 2 years of that. And how can we justify that? How can we not highlight this and let the citizens know this is what's gone on here the last couple of years? It's got to stop.
I
And I
understand
tried
that.
to stop it.
I totally agree with you, but the question the citizens should be raising right now is, what are we doing about this right now? What have we done in the last 6 months to address this stuff? I don't think anybody can answer that question.
I think
Commissioner Pat.
what a lot of this shows us is these were things that the county administrator that was here, some of the decisions that he made that has cost the county the money. And I believe that's a lot of what you're referring to here.
Was the vote that enabled this whole drain on the county treasury. It just couldn't be any plainer to me.
Thank you. Curry, you had a question?
Just
Comment?
Todd Weeks brought a lawsuit. It was dismissed by the federal court. And the day it was scheduled for summary judgment hearings in the county court, he agreed to drop that for no dollars. The only cost to this county was the county agreed not to seek to recover from him the county attorney's fees. And as I understand it from what Louise said earlier, yes, we got assessed by the insurance company who paid those fees, 10% of them or something like that. And that was the only cost. Now, most of the county people defended. We had elected officials and department heads who took Mr. Weeks' side in that litigation against the county. He walked away from his lawsuit. And so, you know,
Mr. King, I don't understand your point.
well, you're talking about mismanagement caused the Todd Weeks lawsuit to cost this county $15,000.
Sir, how did we get into the lawsuit?
Well,
Could it
you
have been
had it on your
avoided?
list.
This is the only county in the state that calls the Department of Justice on one of the other commissioners and the FBI on the sheriff. This is what's gone on here, and do you think Mr. Weeks was treated fairly,
Yes,
Mr. King?
absolutely. I
Okay.
was here at the
With
time.
not very
I
many
was
people
involved
agree
at
with
the
you.
time.
Okay, this is,
But let's move on.
We
It's-
got
move
into
on.
a
This is-
lawsuit. What a mess, what a black eye
yeah,
for the county.
fine, this can be taken offline.
time
Councilman
to vote?
Tuttle?
Nope, I was just going to explain
I
that
did
it was
not
just a
mention
co-pay,
any
so, right.
specific lawsuits in my
No, you
settlements
didn't.
and
Yeah.
judgments.
Hold on, Mr. Tuttle.
That's it, no, it just had to do with it was just part of the cost of defense,
Okay.
so.
Commissioner
Are we
Parrish.
going to vote individually for each commissioner on this, or is there going to be a summary vote?
Well, it depends on how you make a motion, actually.
Yeah.
You can
Or
control,
That's up to the
Yeah.
chair.
well, the.
Well, the
it's up
letter
to anyone
that
to
was
make a
submitted
motion.
to
Yeah.
the committee was a flat rate for everyone. Okay? That's my understanding of how it was written.
That was the request from the Board
Right.
of Commissioners.
Right, for each commissioner position is.
Yeah, each
Okay.
commissioner, yeah.
Right.
So
Yes, Mr.
I'd like
Parrish.
to make a motion that we separate those into individual commissioner spots?
It would be just as easy to make a motion to approve a salary change for one commissioner at a time. And versus anyway, you're going to two steps when you could just go straight to one step on a motion.
Yeah, but wouldn't that request another, a request to the Budget Committee to review that?
I don't think so. What you have there is a request from the Board of Commissioners that each commissioner's salary be $66,500, so you could take the vote on each commissioner's salary.
Yes.
To be clear, when this was set up last year in the budget, we did not fund commissioner salaries, we funded a department. And that money was allocated in a way that was not symmetrical. It wasn't equal across. But I think the intent of the motion was to fund the department. Is there support?
No, I don't think it was done, and it was, each commissioner's salary was discussed separately, and it was voted that way. It was voted on a whole, but each commissioner's salary was discussed. Then we voted on the whole to accept it.
We can fund individual salaries.
So we're doing something different than establishing a budget here. What we're doing here is, under the state statute on elected official compensation, the compensation of an elected official cannot be changed without approval of the Budget Committee. So this is not you're not doing a budget here, you're just looking at a request to change the compensation of elected officials.
I got your point.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
how could it be fair and equitable if we did individual commissioner votes?
Well, all I can think of is the way that the chair described how the budget was established was by considering, if I'm not mistaken, it was Gold and Huxley would be 10 and it would be full less 20 per some representations made.
That's the way it was discussed in the last Budget Committee.
And then, as Committee Member Brandt reminds us, is that was then, those numbers were then used to establish the office budget. But I think there was an understanding that there was going to be a parsing out of the budget in a particular way during that discussion. But that's really different from what we're doing here. It's consideration of this is under section 204 of the statute. It's not your normal 294, and this is just to consider a change in salary of elected officials.
Okay.
So you can consider them as a slate or as an individual. It would just be based on how whatever motions are made.
Okay. Before I present a motion to the committee, I'd like to ask Louise a question. Louise, where are we getting the money from if we pass something?
Well, we have a lot of labor settlements in this fiscal year. Once I know where we have finished on all of them, we had the SEIU negotiations, we had the Teamsters with the sheriff negotiations, we have the non-represented, we're giving a salary insurance claim increases, and we are still negotiating the Teamsters with the road department. This is I consider this another part of that whole, where are we getting the money from for all of the salary changes this year. And I think it's been discussed that we would partially use the carryover from the prior year, increase the revenue of the carryover, because we did not budget for the full carryover that we did receive. And in places that we could just assimilate into that budget, you know, if the budget would allow us to reduce our cost in that budget to pay for the increased cost in salary, we would do that. And if it wasn't feasible in that particular budget, then we would supply it from the general fund with the carryover balance.
Okay. Is the settlement with the Teamsters, could that be, significant from a budget standpoint?
Which Teamsters?
Well, you said there was a negotiation going on.
206?
I can't discuss how much of the negotiation for.
Okay, so that's still ongoing?
That's ongoing, yes.
Okay. Do we have any idea as to the financial impact of that?
You can't have that.
We can't discuss that.
Okay.
What I
Sorry.
can tell you is that the SEIU received about a 2 and something % increase. The non-represented group of the maybe 20 people that Carl King was talking about earlier received a 2 and something % increase. And the sheriff's department through labor negotiations received a 2 and something % increase.
Okay, so those people that are under negotiation right now.
We're not going to speculate as to that. I just want to tell you
Okay.
what
That was my
people
question,
got.
what,
Right,
if they got a 3%.
that's confidential matter right
All right,
Confidential.
all right. Yes,
Whatever we vote on, are we gonna be able to have figures on the total package cost? Salary plus all those other.
we have that
costs?
already. We have that
For
now.
a 5-year, let's say we have a 5-year plan for the county, what that cost is gonna be, can we get that from you?
Not today.
And not,
No, it's hard to
I
do
can't do
because
a
each year is
5-year.
budgeted.
I can't do a 5-year
Let's do 1 year
spread.
multiplied by 5.
I question the relevance,
No.
but also we're only here to consider
This year.
6 months.
And the only impact this would have, because the salaries are set annually, the only impact that any vote on this question today would have is from until the new budget, or
Right.
until this budget period is over,
Yes.
and a new budget and the new salary stuff gets configured. But this is, the impact of this decision will only go until June 30th, 2019.
Okay,
Mr. Chair,
yes,
can I make a comment?
please.
Julie Schmelzer for the record. I would just like to make a comment as somebody who has worked with many boards and has seen the impact of a part-time commissioners on this county. When I was here years ago, I had, and I still have it because it amazed me, an email to a part-time commissioner explaining the need to look at revenue. And I was told that that was not the board's concern. I myself have revenue ideas. I'm eager to get going on them. I really would appreciate commissioners that I don't want to say work with, but ones that are responsive and have the time to actually sit down and discuss these matters with us. I would ask that you at least give us till June, increase the salary to see what is the impact of full-time commissioners? I'll give you some examples right now. In the past, we've looked at when we sell county properties, the belief was that we could only retain 1.5% of those sale proceeds. There's I don't want to say a loophole in the statutes, but there is a way for the county to retain all of the proceeds from our property sales. That is something I'd like to work with commissioners on. That's not a part-time job. Those are full-time discussions. We can also take that money, those proceeds, and we can put them into specific funds such as parks or planning, parks or forestry planning, areas like that. With those funds, we can also create separate accounts where those proceeds then get divvied out to juvenile justice and some other areas. Those are full-time discussions. Those are not part-time discussions. And me as a director of operations, I don't have policy-making decision ability. So that is something that we need to have those dialogues on. On Friday, I actually have somebody coming in from another county to look at our building services department to see what our options are there. Do we need full-time people down there? These are all discussions that should not be made solely by my position. These are things that should be happening with full-time commissioners. Years ago, we talked about a forestry plan. We do have 80 acres that can be, is prime actually to be logged. I've had discussions with somebody, basically somebody in Josephine about coming over and helping us. You know, we do not have the funds to have a full-time forester. Neither do I think we need them. However, it would be nice to have those dialogues. Can we actually contract and have somebody come in so we can get the proceeds from those board feet to help us out in the immediate need? These are things that we can be working for now, so that by the time we have a budget this summer, we actually have some revenue sources identified that don't need to go to the voters. However, as an employee or somebody that uses or interfaces with the commissioners, I need people there to talk to. I need people to roll these ideas off of. I need people to basically ask them their pros and cons of it and to see where we're gonna go. I would ask that you give us, restore the salaries until the upcoming budget to see whether it's effective, to see do they earn that money, and what is the end result when we do have paid commissioners again.
Okay, thank you. Any more comments before I?
Is there a motion?
I'm gonna
Mr.
make a
Chair.
motion. Okay. Kurt?
Thank you.
Mr. Boyce,
I've asked,
sorry.
real quick here, I've asked you all individually and collectively, if you just give me, and now us, 2 more years to break the cycle that we all recognize has got to be changed. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, so there's 2 action items. One is the salary restoration. So we'll do that first, and then we'll discuss Mr. Boyce's separate question on retroactive for his 10,000, I think it is. So I'll make a motion to request the base salary for each commissioner position to be increased to $66,469, effective January 1st, 2019. And to
Maybe
run for the
January
remaining,
7th.
January 7th, 2019, sorry, until the end of the fiscal year, at which time it will be reviewed again with the new budget process.
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Okay.
Okay,
Do a roll call vote.
yeah.
The dollars that costs, if we add in what we would have paid also for Mr. Schroeder. What is the difference?
Well, with the approved, I think we're looking at the approved column, right, Louise? The 30,000? If the committee approves the salary at 66,000 for the 3 commissioners, the total cost, including PERS and everything else, is 130,000 for the remaining of this fiscal year.
Yes, but it only increases the commissioner's budget by 73 to 10. It
Right.
doesn't increase it by 130.
Right.
That's the cost for.
And this is, you don't have this, I guess. As far as the county administrator, that's not in there. I wouldn't,
The county administrator calculations are not in there, and I'm not sure.
probably another 4D.
I'm not gonna.
I wouldn't
make
even
a
know.
guess, And I mean, the county administrator position is already budgeted. It's not gonna increase the budget. It's fully funded, and so we're not asking the committee to increase, or the board to
Okay,
increase.
so what happens to that money? The county administrator, that was funded, it's not gonna be.
It was
spent.
funded under the BOC office, and we do have another employee that's funded through the BOC office.
Using the same funds.
It's in the same fund.
Yeah.
And one salary was 86,000, the other one's 84,000, so it's basically a wash.
Right.
To your
Well,
point.
actually, you have to also figure in there that you had a community development director, and that's now rolled into my position. So
Right.
I'm doing a lot of what the county administrator was doing, plus the community development director is now 1 position at a reduced price.
And
So
that's
you're
one of-
saving really
That had
salaries from
That
2.
had already been rolled into Mr. Schroeder's position.
Not so sure.
No.
It was discussed. I don't think it ever went anywhere.
That was not.
All right.
It could have, we haven't finished discussing costs for economic planning, building, economic development, because there's a lot of decisions to be made about how salaries are going to be assigned to all those departments. So I don't know.
Okay. So there's been a motion and seconded. We've discussed it. Should
We could do a
County-
roll call vote,
roll call?
probably.
Okay.
Is this for the entire budget, though?
This
For-
is for the 3 commissioners.
For the 3 commissioners, that's $66,469 from January 7th, 2019 to the end of the fiscal year of 2019. Commissioner Boyce,
Aye.
Commissioner Patch,
Aye.
Commissioner Gold,
Aye.
Committee Member, Mr. King,
No.
Committee Member Tom Brandt,
No.
Committee Member Bill Ostrowski, yes. Okay. So based on a count of 4 to 2, the motion passes. Okay, on the next subject was on Mr. Boyce submitted a request for a majority of the board approved Commissioner Boyce's request and now makes that request Commissioner Boyce's salary be replenished retroactive from July 1st, 2018 to January 6th, 2019 in the amount of $10,000 before withholding.
And that's actually a request from the board. It was a 2-to-1 vote. So it's a Board of Commissioners request for that. I think
Okay.
you mentioned it's a request from Mr. Boyce, but I just wanted to clarify.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay. So I'll make the motion to replenish retroactively $10,000 from July 1st, 2018 to January 6th, 2019 to Commissioner Boyce. I'd like to open up for discussion.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, second.
Very good. Thank you.
Open up for a discussion, a brief discussion, no more
Mr.
than
Chair.
10 minutes, please.
It's actually 9,930, just interest of actually, I don't want any more than that, thank you.
How much?
9,930.
Okay. So I'd like to open up for discussion, but briefly. I guess my question is this a contract, was this a contractual requirement to give Mr. Boyce back $10,000?
I don't think it's contractual, but it is legal to do.
Okay. Mr. Boyce, why do you feel that you need why do you should be replenished $9,930?
Mr. Chair, we've had this discussion a lot, and I think I
have not had that
best
with
to
the
lay out a
president.
case for the whole salary aspect, so I don't really have anything else to offer, but I thank you.
Do you know that the $10,000 is half of the $20,000 reduction in his salary? If that makes it more clear to you.
No, it doesn't actually.
Okay,
Confuses
so-
it more, I guess.
Okay, so in the budget committee meeting last year, his salary was set at the 46, which is a $20,000 reduction for the second year, although Commissioner Boyce said that he only volunteered that for 1 year. The budget committee decided to continue it this year. So if you're going to restore all salaries to 66, Commissioner Boyce is saying that for the first half of the year, if he had his full salary the full year, he would have had another $10,000. So he's asking for that $10,000 difference in his pay from July 1st through January 6th.
Okay. Wouldn't that be the same if Commissioner Gold had requested the same thing?
Commissioner Gold did not request the same.
Okay. Okay. Any other comments, questions? Okay. I guess we'll vote. Mr. Brandt, how will you vote?
No.
Mr. Boyce?
Aye.
Mr. Pash?
Aye.
Commissioner Pash? Commissioner Gold?
No.
Commissioner King?
No.
I'm sorry, Commissioner King. Committee King. Committee Ostrowski? No. The motion is defeated.
Move we adjourn?
I
have a question.
We have two things.
Does there a person need to be heard? No.
Julie, did you comment?
So, my question is on G, next meeting.
Oh, yes.
It says April 2019, but I did not put a date in, and I'm not sure what date we could have that, because basically, on the end of April, it's only like another week until you have the budget committee meeting. To prepare for this meeting takes a lot of time.
Sure.
And I am not sure how productive it would be just before our budget committee meeting, when I am trying to get that document to you by that date in this very high crunch time during the last part of April and early part of May to get that done.
I think what we can do is we can sort of incorporate that into the question and answer period as we go through the budget. If we have any questions regarding
Because you will have,
three-quarters worth of
you will have
information.
the March statements to look at. So if you incorporate that in the budget committee meetings as you're reviewing for the budget, I really would appreciate it, because it is a lot of work preparing for this meeting,
Right.
and I'm just not sure what our timeline in
No,
April.
I would agree with that. Do any committee members have a question or concern about that? Yes.
I certainly agree, and, you know, I made a comment to the sheriff before he left that I never keep my year straight, but we had a law enforcement group one year that met and reviewed and sat with the departments and made a preliminary recommendation on budget. And one year, the Board of Commissioners actually had a session where they talked about what their goal was and what target they expected the departments to have. And I found both of those were very good expenditures of time. And I don't believe your schedule for the budget process this year includes.
It does include a workshop for board direction on the 2019-20 budget.
With,
There's one.
and that's a meeting, a workshop.
Workshop, I believe, in March.
We put that on.
Okay, you added that. I missed that.
Actually,
I think that's very, very helpful. It's, you know, when the year that the law enforcement group met, it was a fascinating process to
March 27th.
to watch. I wasn't on that, of course, but I sat and watched it, and it was very, very
We hope to be
educational.
prepared this year.
Very educational.
Thank you.
Because some of the department heads, the sheriff and juvenile, did an exceptional job of really meeting the recommendations of controlling costs. Thank you.
Okay, so the next meeting will be to be determined.
So the next quarterly meeting would be,
May something.
it would be, that's another question. When you get the statements for June, which is the end of the year, they are by no means finished.
I understand that.
And there's a lot of accruals to happen, so to have a final June is probably not going to happen till October. So I'm not sure if these quarterly meetings should be quarterly. I think they should be at the end of October and at the end of January. But the audit takes care of June 30th, and the budget committee meeting takes care of the April meeting. So.
Okay. We can discuss that further at the budget meetings, as to the quarterly. Any comments regarding that? Okay, if not, so the date, the next meeting date is open.
We're not going to set the next date unless we set it for October of 2019.
No, okay. Okay, there being no other business, I guess I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
place to fine-tune it, build it, launch it. If you're only your best when you can play more than you work, if inspiration comes from the outside,